Chapter 136. Yongjing slightly revealed her side profile to Nzihao as the corners of her lips curved upwards. Due to the reflection of the light from her glasses, she looked gloomy and strange. When had she, Yongjing, ever been afraid? Nzihao did not say another word. After all, a good show was about to begin. I'll wait to see you get kicked out of Chengtian. After speaking, Yongjing led Mu Xia out of the elevator, leaving Nzihao alone with a helpless look on his handsome face. Inside a secret waiting room, Longjie was playing with her phone as she looked up at Tongning. Are you nervous? Tongning closed her eyes and shook her head. I just want to know what expression Yongjing will have when the time comes. Do you even need to ask? She will definitely go from extremely excited to lifeless eyes, haha. Just thinking about Yongjing's frustrated expression made Longjie feel good. They had already crossed swords so many times. She admired Yongjing for always being so energetic. Even though she had lost to Tongning countless times, she was always able to quickly make a comeback with the determination to stop Tongning. It was hard to tell where she got her courage from. This time, she won't let her off so easily. Tongning opened her eyes. They were bright and resplendent. Of course, if my staff dares to force me, I will directly kick them out. Previously, when Big Boss authority was challenged, didn't he remain silent for a long time? You can only say these words in front of me, Tongning reminded Longjie. She didn't want anyone to use her against her. Don't worry. I'll just wait to watch the show. Longjie sealed her mouth as she quietly scrolled through her phone. At this time, it was time to let Yongjing continue dreaming. 2 p.m. The press conference officially began. Before Luo Hao entered the venue, Yongjing looked for him to confirm. Are you sure President Lan will let Nzihao go today? Why hasn't she cancelled the press conference yet? She has already confirmed she will announce something else. There's no need to cancel it. Plus, isn't it good to give Nzihao a little bit of hope? Luo Hao was dressed in a fitted black handmade suit. He looked tall, handsome and heroic. Yongjing scanned the venue and nodded her head in agreement. Of course I want to see him lose all face. Luo Hao's lips curled into a smile as he strolled towards the entrance of the arena, waiting for Lan Shi's arrival. Chengtian's large venue was currently filled with reporters and media. Luo Hao escorted Lan Shi into the venue and sat down at the front of the stage. In reality, the reason why the media reacted so strongly today, apart from Lan Shi's publicity, was because of the explosive news Nzihao and Yun Xin had released a few years ago. What exactly happened? Up until now, the media had not been able to find out the truth. Lan Shi, who was dressed in a high-class business suit, appeared smart and capable. On her left was the other higher-ups of Chengtian and on her right was Luo Hao. At this moment, Yongjing was standing below the stage, quietly observing the situation. Hello, friends from the media. Lan Shi held onto the microphone and took the initiative to greet the reporters below the stage. Firstly, I would like to welcome all of you. Today, Chengtian Entertainment is hosting this press conference because we have 3 pieces of good news to share with everyone. Firstly, Chengtian Entertainment is preparing to enter the film and television industry. We are currently preparing to film our first film. When the time comes, we would like to ask for everyone's support. Secondly, Chengtian Entertainment's subsidiary company will be opening for business at the end of the month. We are currently recruiting and hoping everyone with ambition can join our big family. Hearing Lan Shi's 2 announcements, Yongjing unconsciously relaxed. She knew. Lan Shi had not mentioned anything about Nzihao in the first 2 announcements. She had decided not to mention anything about Nzihao and use something else to cover up Nzihao's return. So, she subconsciously glanced at Luo Hao. They both seemed to have a card up their sleeves. However, at this time, Lan Shi suddenly announced the 3rd piece of good news. As for the 3rd piece of good news, I would like to announce to everyone that Chengtian's best manager, Mr. Nzihao, will be returning to Chengtian as their top manager. He will continue to serve them as their top manager. As Lan Shi spoke, she stood up and pointed towards the exit of the venue with her right hand. The reporter's attention was drawn to Nzihao, dressed in a white suit, like an elegant prince emerging from a painting. Yongjing and Luo Hao's faces turned bright red. To be exact, Lan Shi's action was like a fiery slap across their faces. Luo Hao lowered his head. It was unclear what he was thinking. Meanwhile, Yongjing glared at Lan Shi angrily. Wasn't Lan Shi afraid that she would take all the resources away? This was impossible. Yongjing panicked. All she could do was watch as Zihao slowly walked towards the stage. In actual fact, if one paid a little attention, it wouldn't be hard to notice that Yongjing's entire body was trembling. Lan Shi glared coldly at Yongjing like she was looking at a clown. It wasn't until Zihao arrived in front of her that she continued to speak to the media. Next, our manager, Zihao, will continue to announce the good news. Zihao looked at everyone and gave a deep bow before straightening up. He then said to everyone in high spirits, to be able to return to Chengtian and return to President Lan's side, I feel very warm and happy. So, I have brought a present for President Lan. After speaking, Zihao stretched out his right hand towards the entrance of the venue, attracting everyone's attention. A tall figure appeared on the red carpet at the entrance. She looked fashionable and noble. She had a unique beauty that belonged to her. She was no longer as plain and clean as she usually was. Oh God! Tongning! What's going on? Why is Tongning here? The reporters immediately went crazy. Tongning was like a legend. She wasn't in the industry, yet she was everywhere. She didn't even make an appearance to explain the incident with Lan Yu. How could she appear at Cheng Tian's press conference? That's right, it's Tongning. She was once the top model in Beijing, the winner of the annual Model Awards Special Contribution Award and one of the hottest topics recently. Today, I will officially announce that she has signed with Chengtian Entertainment. And Zihao's words were extremely infectious as he brought the entire venue to a climax. As for my first task upon returning to Chengtian, it will be to become Tongning's personal manager. I believe she will still be the superstar on the runway. From now on, she will only get better. As Zihao spoke, he looked at Yongjing and Luo Hao with a mocking gaze. It was as if he could see a sense of anger and unwillingness in their eyes. It was as if he could hear them saying, and Zihao actually brought Tongning along. He actually signed Tongning behind her back. How dare Lan Shi play them like this? But, could they not handle the excitement? There was still the main event to come. Chapter 137. Tongning actually signed with Chengtian Entertainment. This was something no one expected. After Tongning left Tianyi, there were many agencies that offered her an olive branch, including Star Age and Creative Century. However, no one expected Tongning to skip the B-list and become a signed model of the big agency Chengtian Entertainment. What was even more surprising was, Zihao was actually Tongning's personal manager. Was it because their experiences were similar? Or was it because they had both experienced low points in their careers? One was once a top model and the other was once a top manager. These two were actually a strong combination. The media predicted that Chengtian was going to create a storm in the modeling industry. Yongjing watched as Tongning slowly walked towards the stage. She looked at the woman that she had racked her brains to stop from entering Chengtian. Through her thin glasses, her eyes burned with anger and hatred. She had told herself many times that Tongning would never be able to enter Chengtian. But, was this what she meant by impossible? Yongjing's hands clenched tightly into fists as a wave of anger spread through her body. Under the countless cameras, Tongning walked confidently onto the stage. Afterwards, she faced the media and bowed politely to them. Hello everyone, I am Tongning. Ever since Tongning announced her comeback, she had made it all the way to where she was today. From the Oriental trend to TQ, as a model, she had used her stunning side to conquer the public. As a celebrity, her low profile and indifference from the rest of the world prevented many attempts at slandering her, and the media no longer dared to defame her. She had slapped them in the face too many times. Especially after the incident with Lan Yu, her unapologetic attitude had won her applause. In everyone's eyes, Tongning was like a clear stream in the modeling industry. Tongning, say a few words. The reporters cheered from below the stage. Tongning smiled and nodded at the crowd as she received the microphone from Zihao. I believe in my choice. In that case, Chengtian Entertainment also has many outstanding models. Do you mind competing with them on the same stage? For example, Li Danny and Hua Yuan. Li Danny was Yang Jing's last trump card. the only one she could use. So, hearing Li Danny's name, Yongjing looked at Tongning with ridicule. Li Danny was an international model and was only 21 years old. Did Tongning want to surpass her? In her dreams, Tongning subconsciously glanced at Yongjing as the corners of her lips curved upwards. She then replied, "Every one of us has our own unique beauty. We all have our own unique highlights. As for me, I still have a long way to go." What she meant was, she simply wanted to walk her own path in peace and ask the media to let her off and not compare herself. "Tongning, I want to ask you a question. From what I know, you previously submitted your resume to Chengtian Entertainment, but I heard they rejected you because you were too old. What method did you use to change their opinion of you?" As soon as these words were out, the reporters were shocked. They never expected Tongning to join Chengtian with such an inside story. From the beginning, Tongning remained calm. However, her gaze suddenly landed on Yongjing. She also looked at Yongjing. Even Luo Hao lifted his head and looked straight into Yongjing's eyes. Yongjing suddenly began to panic. What was the meaning of this? "Tongning, can you answer this question?" The reporters continued to ask, but this question was too sharp. So, she picked up the microphone and said, "Actually, I have something else that I would like to announce to the public today." The reporters looked at she confusedly. They couldn't understand what she wanted to do. Afterwards, she pulled out a paper envelope with the words resignation letter written on it. As soon as Yongjing saw it, her heart skipped a beat as she panicked. Chengtian's old hero, Miss Yongjing, has handed me her resignation letter today. I am extremely grateful to her for all the hard work and contributions she has made to Chengtian over the years. I simply hope that from now on, your life will be even more exciting. So, I officially approve your resignation letter. This was a public event with a large number of reporters present. Yet, she approved Yongjing's resignation letter in front of everyone. Yongjing felt her entire body tremble as she almost fell to the ground. This was the bargaining chip she used to threaten Shi. Who would have thought Shi would use it to kick her out of Chengtian? Kick her out of Chengtian? She had personally handed in her resignation letter. She had personally cut off her own path of retreat. How could she be fired by Chengtian, just like that? Yongjing never imagined Shi would be so ruthless to kick her out in front of so many people. "Yongjing, come up here and say a few words to everyone." Shi waved at Yongjing. She had handed in her resignation letter at the same time as Luo Hao, yet, Shi had kicked her out. Yongjing sneered. Although her body was drained of energy, her pride didn't allow her to lose her composure. So, she walked over to the stage and faced the media. "Firstly, I would like to thank Chengtian Entertainment for all the help they have given me over the years and President Lan's concern. However, regarding my resignation, I have nothing to say. I simply hope for the best from now on. That's right, I would like to announce that I will be officially leaving Chengtian. However, before I leave, I will make sure to hand over my duties properly. Please rest assured, President Lan. Will Miss Yang take one of Chengtian's models with her?" The media's question pierced straight into Yongjing's heart. She even suspected Shi was the mastermind behind all of this. At a place like this, she couldn't possibly say she would take Li Danny with her. So, she clenched her teeth and shook her head, "Of course not." Yongjing had no idea how she finished speaking and how she got off the stage. All her years of work and meticulous planning had been destroyed, just like that. She had dug her own grave just like that. Plus, Luo Hao had promised to help, but what happened in the end? Yongjing was the only one that was so stupid and arrogant enough to think she could get help. Tongning watched as Yongjing left with a complex look in her eyes. Did it feel good to have nothing? Not long after, the press conference came to an end. After greeting Shi, Tongning left Chengtian with Zihao. However, she did not expect to find Yongjing waiting for her at the entrance. "Tongning, let's have a talk." Tongning looked at Yongjing. Her eyes were blood red. She wasn't sure if it was because of sadness or anger. Chapter 138. Tongning understood how Yongjing was feeling. Just a moment ago, her mind must have gone blank. Now, It was time for her to break down. It turned out, it wasn't that Yongjing wasn't afraid. And Zihao stood in front of Tongning, ready to stop the two from approaching. However, Tongning looked at Zihao comfortingly. What are you trying to say? What did you say in front of Lan Shi? Or, what did you do in front of Lan Shi? It turned out, Yongjing had placed all the blame on her. Yongjing, did you think my words would be able to sway Lan Shi? Tongning asked calmly. Why don't you ask yourself what you've done that crossed Lan Shi's bottom line? You seem to have forgotten your identity as a manager. Or do you think Lan Shi is too easy to bully and has grown old? For Lan Shi to get to where she is today, she didn't rely on you as a manager. Her ability, foresight and courage are the key to Cheng Tian's success. It's bad enough that you tried to stop me, but you shouldn't have challenged her. Otherwise, the situation today would have been completely different. After all, if she wanted to strangle you to death, it would be easier than you think. After hearing Tongning's words, Yongjing took a few steps back in a panic. Just now, when she stepped onto the stage, she had relied on a moment of courage. But, now that the situation was set in stone, she suddenly felt a sense of fear. Tongning admired Yongjing's expression. Her expression remained the same. Of course, she no longer needed to care about a stray dog like Yongjing as she left Cheng Tian with Zihao. Because, what awaited Yongjing was nothing but misery. Lan Shi still hasn't dealt with Luo Hao. And Zihao casually reminded as he followed behind Tongning, this person has hidden himself deeper than Yongjing and is even harder to deal with. If Lan Shi kicks Luo Hao out, who's going to hold you back? Tongning asked gently. You don't seem to be afraid of anything. And Zihao helped Tongning open the car door. He was curious where her courage and calmness came from. Tongning boarded the van. Her gaze was clear and determined. I will walk the path I believe is right. Why should I be afraid? The man behind you is either so weak that he needs you to protect him, or so strong that you have nothing to fear. Which one is he? Tongning's expression remained unchanged as she shook her head. You promised not to ask about my private life. Okay, then let's talk about her Vision's filming preparations. We'll leave for Moscow in 3 days. And Zihao did not ask any further. The only thing on his mind right now was to help Tongning achieve her dream and become a top supermodel. That way, his years as a manager would not go to waste. Tongning nodded her head. She was indeed tired. Did she have 3 days to rest? At the same time, she could accompany Mo Ting. And Zihao secretly observed Tongning and realized she wasn't completely devoid of smiles. It seemed, only when she thought of the man behind her, did she reveal her most tender side. So, he was curious, what kind of man could control Tongning? How meticulous did this man have to be able to keep up with Tongning? Perhaps, as he had guessed, the man needed Tongning's protection. Of course, he had no idea that he would have the opportunity to witness Tongning's man during this trip to Moscow. Not long after, Long Jie also emerged from Cheng Tian. After climbing into the car, she danced around excitedly. Sorry. I've kept you waiting. I was just about to go listen to some gossip. I just heard Yongjing went to look for President Lan. From the looks of it, she doesn't seem to be satisfied. She's asking for it. And Zihao replied coldly. However, Lan Yu is in Yongjing's hands. I can't stop worrying about this ticking time bomb. If Yongjing doesn't make a move, how would you know how she plans to use this chess piece? Tongning remained calm. Of course, apart from Mo Ting, no one else could tell what she was thinking. Are you waiting for her to make a move? And Zihao understood what Tongning was trying to say. Tongning smiled without saying a word. However, when she thought about it, she realized whether it was Mo Yuro in the past or Lan Yu and Yongjing now, when they lifted a rock and smashed it on their own feet. On top of that, they had helped Tongning achieve her current status. The more people tried to harm others, the more courage Tongning had to move forward. But, I'm guessing she won't have much of a chance. After all, Lan Shi never gives her enemies a chance to make a comeback. And Zihao was probably referring to the scene in front of them. Yongjing and Lan Shi were sitting alone in the office with different expressions on their faces. Lan Shi had her head lowered as she worked on some documents. Meanwhile, Yongjing was hesitant to speak. President Lan. Shouldn't you be handling the handover? Lan, she asked coldly. I actually don't want to leave Cheng Tian. I know I was wrong, I shouldn't have been so naive to use you. I really can't bear to give up on my career. I don't want to destroy everything I have. Yongjing lowered herself as she cried in front of Lan Shi. This was the first time she had admitted defeat like this. In front of the media, you've already admitted to leaving Cheng Tian. Now that you're begging me, aren't you slapping yourself in the face? President Lan. I really don't dare to do this anymore. Can you give me another chance? Hearing this, Lan Shi finally lifted her head. I've given you plenty of chances, but what did you do? How could I, the almighty CEO, be threatened by a mere manager like you? Who do you think you are? Yongjing, you think too highly of yourself. How dare you fight with me? Fight with Tongning? You've set so many traps for Tongning, but have you been able to stop her? A manager with no self-awareness like you will never be hired by any agency. Let me tell you, Yongjing, from now on, you have nothing to do with this industry. As long as I, Lan Shi, am around, you, Yongjing, will never have a chance to make a comeback. Yongjing's entire body trembled. This was the first time Lan Shi had humiliated someone in such a way. This was humiliation, an obvious humiliation. Yongjing couldn't take it anymore as she turned around and walked away from Lan Shi. Pride. Did she still have any? Even her last bit of pride had been torn to shreds by Lan Shi. Yongjing ran all the way down to the 3rd floor. In the end, she bumped into Luo Hao. As their eyes met, Yongjing held it in for a moment. As she brushed past Luo Hao, she said, "Help me get revenge." Although Lan Shi had made Luo Hao stay, Luo Hao was well aware he would end up like him. So, he wasn't going to let them off easy. I promise you, I will do whatever it takes. Yongjing relaxed as she turned around and left Cheng Tian. In the end, she hid in an unknown street corner and broke down in tears. Who would have thought she would end up like this? It didn't matter, she still had Lan Yu. Chapter 139. After Cheng Tian's press conference ended, Tongning went to her vision for a meeting arranged by Zihao. That evening, Zihao drove Tongning home. Although you have 3 days off, you need to let me know where you are going and what you are doing. At least, let me know what to do, Zihao turned to look at Tongning. As for the outside world, you have always done a good job of blocking it out, so I won't make any special arrangements. I know what to do, Tongning nodded as she closed her eyes to rest. Also, send the flight number to Longjie. When the time comes, I will take the flight myself. Why? Zihao looked at Tongning questioningly. Then, he seemed to have realized something as he rejected, Are you planning to bring someone else with you? No way, that is during your working hours. The chances of you being photographed are too high. Tongning opened her eyes and glanced at Zihao without saying a word. Are you two that inseparable? Yes, inseparable, Tongning nodded with a gentle smile. What exactly do you see in that man? If he really cares about you, would he let you fall into danger time and time again without helping you? Zihao couldn't understand Tongning's insistence. To him, it was pointless for a man to rely on a woman to live off a woman. Especially in this industry where there were so many colors and complexities. If he truly understood Tongning, he wouldn't be a burden to her. Tongning continued to smile, but Longjie rolled her eyes in the back. She couldn't help but think to herself, that's because you don't know her husband is Mo Ting. Do you think a small manager like you can casually see Big Boss? If I told you, you would be scared to death. You promised not to ask about my private life. Zihao wanted to say something else, but Tongning's words cut him off. He simply nodded his head. What else can I say? I know exactly what I am doing. I also know exactly what kind of person I like. After speaking, Tongning got out of the car with Longjie's help. Soon, her figure disappeared through the luxurious entrance of Hyatt Regency. Although Tongning explained this way, Zihao still felt a man that relied on a woman wasn't a good person. However, Cheng Tian was currently in a mess. He needed to return to the agency to help Lan Shi clean it up. Tongning, are you really not going to tell manager and about Big Boss? Longjie followed behind Tongning with a smile on her face, But, I really want to tell him. Tongning opened the door and stepped into the house. As soon as she smelled the delicious aroma of food, the corners of her lips curved upwards. I still don't fully trust him. Long Jie smelled the aroma and thought about Big Boss cooking skills. She couldn't help but swallow her saliva. I want to eat too. In that case, let's go together. Tongning did not mind. Although Long Jie didn't want to disturb the couple, she couldn't resist the temptation of the fragrance. The three of them sat at the same table, but the food they ate was completely different. Long Jie froze for a moment before understanding dawned on her. Do the two of you have to split your meals into 2 portions? What else? Tongning laughed. Can I eat the same as you? Do you still want your figure? Ah. Big Boss, that's great. Long Jie tried to suck up to Mo Ting, but Mo Ting simply continued to look at his documents with a serious expression. Tongning looked at Mo Ting and subconsciously took the documents from his hands. Her meaning was obvious. Eating like this was bad for your stomach. Mo Ting turned his head and glanced at Tongning. He stretched out his hand and stroked her hair, not insisting any further. Seeing this, Long Jie quietly put down her bowl and chopsticks and left the table. I'm leaving. Hey, you're not going to finish your food? No, I'm never coming to your house to eat again. Long Jie waved her hand as she grabbed her bag from the sofa and left Hyatt Regency. She felt like an ordinary person that had broken into the king and queen's castle and was being tortured to the point of discomfort. After dinner, Tongning and Mo Ting leaned against each other and watched a movie. Without their celebrity aura, they were just like a normal couple. The couple watched an educational film about caring for stray dogs. Tongning was so moved that she burst into tears on Mo Ting's shoulder. Meanwhile, Mo Ting sat to one side and helplessly handed her a tissue. Was it that touching? Tongning nodded her head. However, through the flickering blue screen, she secretly glanced at Mo Ting's perfect side profile. It wasn't because the film was touching, it was because of the person watching it with her. The most charming man in the world was the one that could command the wind and clouds in his career. A woman's most reliable support was always at home. No matter how much jewelry she had on her, it was nothing compared to waking up to a glass of warm water by her bedside. Ting, will you be busy with work for the next 3 days to make time for Moscow? Tongning asked gently. Actually, I can do it myself. No, Mo Ting rejected straightforwardly. Moscow is a relatively cold place. I don't want you to be wronged. Tongning did not say another word. She simply placed a kiss on Mo Ting's chin. As she thought about the disdain Zihao had towards Mo Ting, the smile on Tongning's face grew wider. Once you see a person, you will immediately know if they are living off a woman. After an entire day of frustration, Yongjing had nowhere to go. All she wanted to do was grab onto her last chance and make good use of Lan Yu. However, she seemed to have forgotten, Lan Yu was never one of her artists. Although she had been frozen out by Star Age, it had nothing to do with her. Yongjing anxiously tried to find Lan Yu. She went to all the places she frequented, but Lan Yu refused to pick up her phone. It wasn't until late at night that her phone finally connected. Hello. Lan Yu. I'm at the night bar. Come and play. Lan Yu said simply before hanging up the phone. Yongjing had a bad feeling, but she assumed Lan Yu was simply out to relax. But, by the time she arrived at the bar, Lan Yu was wearing a hat and dancing. From her exaggerated movements, it was obvious something was wrong. Yongjing ran over and grabbed onto Lan Yu's wrist. However, Lan Yu was still in a daze. She broke free from Yongjing's grasp and pointed at her as she yelled, "Who are you?" Seeing Lan Yu's confused expression, the word drug addict suddenly appeared in Yongjing's mind. But, she was only 16 years old. Come with me, I'm not leaving. Lan Yu pushed Yongjing aside, grabbed a bottle of beer and threw it at Yongjing's head. Are you crazy? I don't even know you, why are you dragging me? Hearing the loud bang, the surrounding people stopped dancing and looked at the commotion in the corner. Seeing Yongjing had fainted, Lan Yu pulled down her hat and ran out of the bar in shock. Because of the dim lighting, the surrounding people couldn't see Lan Yu's face clearly. They simply surrounded Yongjing and asked her with concern, "Are you okay?" Yongjing woke up and rubbed her head. At this time, someone finally asked, "Was the person that threw a bottle at you Tongning?" I think she was. Chapter 140. Tangning. Hearing this name, Yongjing suddenly woke up as she apologetically begged, I hope you can keep this a secret. Don't worry, we won't tell anyone. You really don't need to go to the hospital. In an environment like this, how could rumors not spread? I really don't need to. Yongjing stood up with the help of her staff. After rubbing her head and confirming she was fine, she carefully left Night Color Bar. After returning to her car, she carefully tried to remember how Lan Yu looked. She was wearing a hat, so no one had discovered her real identity. As a 16-year-old, it was impossible for her to enter a bar, which meant she must have used a fake ID. After all, Lan Yu was on drugs and had no future. But, at this time, she could still take the opportunity to slander Tangning. At least all the pain and suffering she had gone through wasn't in vain. The name Xiao Tangning was given to people for no reason. Not only this, Yongjing also wanted to ruin Tangning's collaboration with her vision. So, she parked her car on the side of the road and gave editor Lin a phone call. She told her there was a huge scandal and that she wanted to meet with her. Editor Lin already knew about everything that happened in Chengtian today. Although she no longer wanted to talk to Yongjing, since Yongjing said it was related to her vision, after thinking for a moment, she decided to give her the address. Time quickly passed and it was already late into the night. The keywords Tangning taking drugs and hitting people slowly rose from the bottom of the search rankings. Yongjing excitedly arrived at Editor Lin's home. She sat down on the sofa and handed the phone to Editor Lin. Tangning has a stain on her record, you can't use her on the front cover. Editor Lin propped her head up with her left hand and grabbed the phone with her right. She threw the phone back to Yongjing. Whether this is Tangning or not, you know very well. Yongjing, I'm only reminding you because I'm your friend. Tangning has someone backing her up. No matter what you do, you won't be able to touch her. Who is it? Yongjing was stunned. She never expected to hear something like this from Editor Lin. I won't tell you. But don't challenge someone's bottom line so easily. Otherwise, you may not even be able to stay in Beijing. That's impossible. If Tangning had someone backing her up, she wouldn't be climbing up the ladder so hard. You know how hard it is for others. Then can you do less dirty things and do good deeds for yourself? Editor Lin scoffed, Yongjing, I know you've been kicked out by Cheng Tian, but I have something to say to you. A pitiful person must have a hateful side. Try and touch Tangning again. Let's see if they'll make your life a living hell. Yongjing glared coldly at Editor Lin. She finally understood what it meant to be pushed when a wall was down. The entertainment industry was just that realistic. Now that she was down, it served her right to be bullied. Even if you don't think about yourself, you have to think about your mother. Being competitive all her life, she will not have a good ending. After hearing this, Yongjing suddenly stood up and glared angrily at Editor Lin. That's enough, we are merely the pot calling the kettle black. I simply want to know, who is the person behind Tangning? Editor Lin did not respond to Yongjing's question. Instead, she let out a laugh of ridicule. Yongjing's heart sank. She picked up her phone and prepared to leave. At this time, Editor Lin finally spoke, just wait and see, Yongjing, the situation will change tomorrow. Yongjing did not look back as she left Editor Lin's home. In reality, she was starting to feel scared. If Editor Lin was speaking the truth. If Tangning really had someone backing her, then with her current situation, what could she do to fight against Tangning? No, let's not scare ourselves first. Let's wait and see what happens tomorrow. Later that night, rumors of Tangning taking drugs spread like wildfire online. It was a hot topic with a lot of clicks. However, thinking about how many times Tangning had slapped them in the face, no one dared to come to a conclusion. Firstly, there was no evidence. Secondly, they were starting to believe in Tangning's character. At 2 a.m., Mo Ting received a phone call from Lu Che. President, the madam is on the news again. I've already sent someone to investigate. The person taking drugs is Lan Yu. As they look too similar, the madam has been misidentified. Mo Ting pulled out his phone and gently released Tangning from his embrace. He then stood up and walked into the study room. Have you found the evidence? Because there were a lot of people at the time, I have all the evidence. However, it's not in the highest quality. Contact the mainstream media, release the evidence and change the search rankings. As for the information on school violence that I previously asked you to release, it's time for it to be put to use. However, don't rush into it for now. I want to see which media still wants to make things difficult for Tongning. Lu Che nodded and did not say another word. After a short pause, he added, also, President, this rumor was spread by Yongjing. After hearing this, Mo Ting's gaze darkened. He then said in a cold voice, do you need me to teach you how to deal with someone that refuses to learn? No need. Lu Che understood what Mo Ting was trying to say. Since Yongjing liked to fight so much, then she wouldn't be able to live the rest of her life in peace. Yongjing sat in her car and waited the entire night. By the time she woke up, the search rankings had completely changed from Tongning to Lan Yu. Yongjing turned off her phone in fear as she searched her mind for Editor Lin's warning. Tongning had someone backing her. How could Tongning have someone backing her? This was impossible. Tongning had previously been bullied so badly by her. Even if there was someone backing her, there was no way they would take her seriously. At most, she would be a mistress. Yongjing put away her phone. Originally, she wanted to go look for Luo Hao, but halfway there, she received a phone call from the hospital. Miss Yang, please come to the hospital to pay the hospital fees for your mother. I already have no money, who am I supposed to find to pay the fees? Yongjing yelled. In that case, all you can do is bring your mother home to recover. How was she supposed to take care of a paralyzed child? Above all, if a private matter like this got out, how was she supposed to face the world? Yongjing had no choice but to turn around and head to the hospital. Meanwhile, the news of Lan Yu taking drugs had already caused an uproar. Even Lan Yu's parents stepped out to clarify, this can't be my daughter. If it was my daughter, I would immediately kill myself in front of you. Isn't Lan Yu nicknamed Little Tongning? My daughter looks so much like Tongning. How could you guys be so sure that Tongning wasn't the one taking drugs? How could you guys be so sure that it was my daughter? During an interview, Lan Yu's mother said as she cried, I know my daughter's temper the best. There's no way she would take drugs. It must have been Tongning. She must have used such a despicable method to frame her. It's not my daughter, it's Tongning. Chapter 141. Seeing Lan Yu's mother crying in the video, even Lan Shi, who was sitting in the office, couldn't help but laugh. From the looks of it, Lan Yu's face had been used as a shield. How dare she use Tongning as a scapegoat? However, in order to refute the rumors, Lan Shi immediately ordered her team to release a statement claiming that the woman was definitely not Tongning. She also asked the netizens to believe Tongning and immediately called the police. As soon as Cheng Tian released the statement, Lan Yu's mother tried to commit suicide. She claimed that the evil hands of the entertainment industry were trying to kill her daughter and that the netizens were trying to destroy a child's future. As Tongning was on vacation, after speaking to Lan Shi told her not to make an appearance. So, Tongning put on some casual home clothes as she lay on Mo Ting's lap and listened to the entertainment news on the TV. Mo Ting asked Lu Che to bring all the documents home and said he wasn't feeling well and didn't want to go to the office. But, Tongning knew, with the chaos outside, Mo Ting simply didn't want to leave her alone. Ting, this afternoon, I want to go to the police station, Tongning said as she rested on Mo Ting's lap. Okay, Mo Ting nodded. Mo Ting nodded his head. There was no need to ask why Tongning was doing this. He knew, when it came to drug abuse, even if the netizens were biased towards her, she still needed to present evidence to prove her innocence. If she missed this opportunity, she would end up being used against in the future. This time, Lan Yu was completely finished. Not only that, Mo Ting did not tell Tongning. Currently, the hottest topic of discussion online was not the mother fans that supported Lan Yu, but the children of her age. They felt that as a public figure, Lan Yu did not set a good example for her age and was a disgrace to the young people. They even sent a report letter to the National Youth Organization, as well as various complaints and suggestions. As a result of this, Lan Yu's future ban was no longer limited to the entertainment industry, but the entire country. So, Lan Yu's mother's actions did not help her daughter. Instead, harmed her. However, Lan Yu's mother refused to give up. After her suicide attempt, she once again accepted an interview at the hospital. As Lan Yu's mother, I feel very guilty. I wasn't able to protect her and allowed her to suffer such pain. So, I don't have the face to continue living on this earth. As for those demons who won't even spare a 16-year-old child, let's see who the heavens will spare in the end. The reporters surrounded the hospital room to the brim. One of them even moved his microphone closer to Lan Yu's mother and asked, "Madam, are you referring to Tongning when you say demon? Who else could it be?" Lan Yu's mother scoffed as she glared at the camera. "Do you think that Tongning took drugs and framed your daughter? Did you call the police right away?" From what I know, Tongning's management agency, Cheng Tian Entertainment, has already called the police. Are you afraid of being investigated by the police? Hearing the word police, Lan Yu's mother froze. She looked a little flustered as she said shamelessly to the reporters, "I don't know anything, don't ask me. All I know is, my daughter has been wrongly accused." After hearing this, the reporters couldn't help but look at each other, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. "Get out of here, all of you, get out. Otherwise, I will kill myself again in front of you." The reporters could sense that Lan Yu's mother was trying to manipulate the public's opinion, but in reality, she was simply trying to deceive herself. After all, Lan Yu's appearance that night was witnessed by a lot of people. So, there was more or less evidence that could be found. As more and more evidence surfaced, as the entire incident became more and more chaotic, and as Lan Yu's mother prepared to commit suicide for a second time to force Tongning and the netizens to confess, one of the parties involved, the Tongning that never interfered with the underworld, finally appeared. Under the protection of her manager, she headed straight to the police station dressed in a simple outfit. She never defended herself, but she could take the most direct action to prove her innocence, and that was to do a urine test for drugs. So, when the reporters once again asked Lan Yu's mother if she knew that Tongning had already taken a drug test and if she was brave enough to take Lan Yu for a drug test, she was completely dumbfounded. Of course, she didn't have the courage to do so. She was well aware of her daughter's personality. She simply wanted to use Tongning to divert attention. But, she never expected, Tongning couldn't even be bothered to argue with her and headed straight to the police station. 1 p.m. Tongning released her results to the public. The results were negative and the doctor concluded that she had no history of drug use. This was Tongning's biggest counterattack against the series of jokes Lan Yu had created. Drug use. What a serious word. As soon as the netizens saw Tongning's results, they were furious. Why did Tongning always have to take the blame for Lan Yu's shameful actions? Was it simply because Tongning looked like her? In an instant, an anti-Lan Yu alliance was formed online. All sorts of fans and passers-by claimed that there was no mini Tongning and there was only one Tongning in the world. They suggested that no one should be Lan Yu's accomplice and bully the tolerant Tongning. Meanwhile, after being slapped across the face by Tongning, Lan Yu's mother could no longer make a sound. However, the reporters' questions became sharp and angry. "Madam, Tongning has already responded to the drug incident. She has been innocent from the beginning. Previously, you were so certain that Tongning had framed another woman. Now that Tongning has presented evidence, what do you think? Madam, are you trying to use Tongning to divert the public's attention because Lan Yu and Tongning look alike? Madam, how has Tongning offended you? Why is she being slandered like this? Madam, is it because your daughter is the only person in the world that Tongning deserves to be slandered by you?" Lan Yu's mother sat in bed. She wasn't even 40 years old yet, but because of Lan Yu's incident, she was already mentally and physically exhausted. Especially when faced with the reporters' questions, she could only hug her blanket and cry. "I know, I have wronged Tongning. I know, I just don't want to destroy my daughter. If you don't want to destroy your own daughter, then must you destroy someone else's woman? There is no such logic in this world." Hearing the reporter's sarcasm, Lan Yu's mother moved her lips and finally replied with a choked-up voice, "I was wrong. I didn't teach Lan Yu well and I have wronged the innocent Tongning. If Tongning was really slandered today, then if you say you're sorry, How are you going to compensate for her innocence? Most importantly, where was Lan Yu at the time? Chapter 142. After the drug incident broke out, Lan Yu hid at her friend's house, too afraid to leave. Especially after seeing her mother take the blame for her, she felt a little guilty. But she had no idea the incident would continue to grow. In the morning, the drug incident was revealed, and in the afternoon, the media revealed that Lan Yu had been involved in school violence. At the age of 14, she had instigated others to gang up on a female classmate until her left leg was crippled. Afterwards, she changed her name and moved to Beijing. As soon as the news broke, everyone was shocked. They never thought a 14-year-old child could be this bad. Above all, the police quickly confirmed that the drug user was Lan Yu. Not only that, the police also found out that Lan Yu's parents were afraid that she would be punished for her school violence, so they changed her age by 2 years. In reality, when she committed the school violence, she was already 16 years old. Now, she had just turned 18 years old. In an instant, Lan Yu's name became infamous in Beijing. Not only that, the police also began to look for her everywhere. Seeing this explosive news, Lan Yu began to panic. She paced back and forth at her friend's house in fear. She no longer had anyone to rely on and no one to turn to. What else could she do? Her friend was also a model. She had met Lan Yu during the new talent competition. After seeing Lan Yu's disgusting actions on the news, she immediately threw Lan Yu's belongings in front of her. "You should leave, Lan Yu. You are too shocking. I can't believe I helped you smear Tungning's name. I never thought you would slap me so hard." Lan Yu had nowhere to go. Seeing that her friend was no longer going to help her, she immediately knelt on the floor and begged, "Xiaoya, I beg you, don't chase me away. If I go out now, I will definitely die. The reporters and police will not let me go." After hearing Lan Yu's words, her friend sneered and pulled out her phone to call the police. "I must be blind to have become friends with you. If you don't leave, then wait for the police to come knocking." Seeing that her friend was about to call the police, Lan Yu immediately jumped up and tried to grab the phone. The man noticed her actions and pushed her forcefully. Lan Yu stumbled and fell to the ground. However, her face brushed past the sharp edge of the coffee table and a trail of blood immediately appeared on the left side of her face. Lan Yu touched her left cheek and almost fainted from the pain. However, her friend did not stop making phone calls. Not only that, she even called an ambulance. Afterwards, she said to Lan Yu, "In a moment, when the police arrive, I will tell them everything that happened to your cheek. I'm not like you." After speaking, she pulled out a first aid kit to help Lan Yu stop the bleeding. Of course, with such a long scar across the left side of Lan Yu's face, unless she had undergone plastic surgery, there would be a hideous and obvious scar on the left side of her face. At 7 p.m., the police finally arrested Lan Yu from Ling Xiaoya's home. As for the injuries on her face, Ling Xiaoya gave them a complete explanation. Such an honest and clear-cut child immediately received praise from the netizens. Not only that, perhaps it was karma. Lan Yu was injured everywhere, but of all places, her face was injured. Netizens started to ridicule her. She had used her face to cause so much trouble for Tongning. Now that her face was injured, it was God's punishment. Good and evil will always be rewarded. As for Lan Yu's mother, after watching her daughter get arrested, she fell ill overnight and was sent to the hospital, worsening her condition. The entire Beijing was reporting news about Lan Yu. An 18-year-old girl in the prime of her youth had hidden so many secrets. Thinking about it, it was quite scary. It caused many people to reflect, especially when it came to parenting. Yongjing was also at the hospital. Through the TV in her room, she kept an eye on news about Lan Yu. Apart from being shocked, she was also afraid. Seeing Lan Yu in such a pitiful state, she couldn't help but worry about herself. She had just lost her job and her family's main source of income had been cut off. Meanwhile, her mother was bedridden and even though she had a brother, he could only support himself. What was she going to do from now on? All she could do was find a job as soon as possible. Luckily, in the eyes of the public, she had only resigned from Chengtian and not been fired. So, Finding a decent job shouldn't be too difficult. However, to her surprise, the police came to talk to her. Earlier in the night, there were so many witnesses who saw her arguing with Lan Yu, so they couldn't help but suspect she had something to do with drugs. Yongjing tried her best to explain, but the police insisted on taking her for a test. The incident with Lan Yu was already at the heart of the discussion. Now that Yongjing was taken away by the police, the public couldn't help but suspect her involvement in drugs. It didn't take long before the two of them became entangled. Inside the cold police station, Yongjing had no friends or family to contact. All she could do was give Luo Hao a phone call. Originally, she had already given up hope. But, in the second half of the night, Luo Hao appeared. After experiencing the events of the past 2 days, Yongjing's pride had been completely destroyed. So, she no longer cared about her embarrassing appearance as she said to Luo Hao, "Help me get out of here. In exchange, I can tell you a valuable secret." Luo Hao furrowed his brows as he found a lawyer to bail Yongjing out and took her to his car. At first, Yongjing was quiet. But, in the end, she couldn't take it anymore and burst into tears in Luo Hao's sports car. Luo Hao looked at her without saying anything to comfort her. He simply handed her a tissue. "I can't win against Tongning. I admit defeat," Yongjing said as she sobbed. "I have decided to leave Beijing. I can't afford to mess around, all I can do is hide." "It's not that bad." "It's that bad, Luo Hao." Yongjing wiped away her tears as she lifted her head and looked at Luo Hao in seriousness. "To prevent President Lan from kicking you out of Chengtian, you need to suppress Nzihao and Tongning. Otherwise, once Lan she develops someone else, she will mercilessly kick you out. What I want to tell you is, Tongning has someone backing her." Luo Hao froze in shock. "This is what Editor Lin told me. As it turns out, she was right. I really don't want to throw my life away. The other party has obviously been angered by me. You may be able to use this information. Of course, no matter who the person backing Tongning is, she is definitely not single. I'll leave this secret with you. You've helped me so many times, it's time for me to return the favor." After hearing this, Luo Hao pulled out a gold card from his bag and handed it to Yongjing. "No matter where you go, you need to have money to protect yourself." Yongjing looked at Luo Hao as tears began to flow from her eyes. "What's the point of fighting to the death? In the end, you still ended up with nothing. I hope this information is useful to you." Chapter 143. Luo Hao had a complicated expression on his face. Especially after seeing Yongjing lose like this, there was an indescribable feeling in his heart. In the end, his throat moved, but no words came out. After Yongjing calmed down, he finally asked, "Where are you going?" "I'll take you there." "No need." Yongjing shook her head. "Luo Hao, all these years, although I've done a lot of bad things behind your back, it all started from the moment you forced me to abort the child. So, I've never felt like I owe you anything." After speaking, Yongjing pushed open the car door and quickly disappeared. Leaving Luo Hao behind, his heart was in a mess. Child, yes, the problem was with the child. But, this was the entertainment industry. Did she want to end up like Nzihao and Yun Xin? In the dark, Luo Hao revealed a cold smile. If he hadn't helped Yongjing behind the scenes all these years, with her arrogant personality, would she have the status she had today? He couldn't deny that he still had feelings for Yongjing, but he would never turn back. Right now, Chengtian's power was evenly divided. He had Hua Yuan, and Nzihao had Tongning, and Li Danny, who originally belonged to Yongjing, was temporarily under the control of the vice president. It seemed, the battle for the best resources was about to begin. Did Tongning have someone backing her? Who didn't have someone backing them? If the person backing Tongning was really that strong, Tongning wouldn't be in her current position a long time ago. So he didn't think the information Yongjing revealed would be of much use. To put it simply, during the confrontation between Lan Yu and Tongning, Tongning simply moved her fingers and did not say a word. She simply pulled out a urine test report and dealt with Lan Yu in a clean and efficient manner. She also maintained her level of exposure. This Tongning was indeed a strong opponent. Because of the incident with Lan Yu, Tongning's reputation once again improved and she received more and more invitations from A-list agencies. Among them, there was no lack of big-name endorsements. So, with Enzihao's arrangements, Tongning's schedule became even more packed. Apart from these 3 days of vacation, she would be busy for the rest of the month. The night before heading to Moscow to film her vision, Enzihao gave Tongning a phone call. "Tomorrow, I need to go to Chengtian for a short meeting to confirm your schedule. You have a 1 p.m. flight to Moscow. Are you sure you won't be going the same way as me? What if something happens?" Tongning was in the middle of packing her and Mo Ting's luggage. She turned her head to look at the man's busy profile and smiled. "I can handle it. If there's a problem this time, then in the future, you'll have to listen to me for all public arrangements. How about it?" "There won't be a problem," Tongning said with certainty. "Remember what you said yourself." Compared to other artists, Tongning's self-discipline was reassuring. So, Enzihao did not force her. After all, Tongning had been in the industry for 8 to 9 years and was well aware of the intricacies. After Tongning hung up the phone, Mo Ting put down the documents in his hands and approached her from behind. Inhaling the fragrance on her body, he stretched out his arms and hugged her. "I haven't showered yet." Tongning struggled. "I don't mind," Mo Ting replied in a deep voice. He then reached out his hand and gently stroked her soft hair. "I've seen the work Enzihao has done for you. It will definitely help you on the rise. From what I can see, he has already started to control his fans and has an experienced team. Our Tongning is finally no longer the wild child that no one cares about." Tongning turned her head and looked into his obsidian eyes. She let out a gentle laugh. "Does that mean Big Boss can stop worrying?" Mo Ting lowered his head and placed his chin on her shoulder. "When it comes to you, I will never be able to stop worrying. That's why you accompanied me to Moscow for a magazine cover shoot despite being so tired." Tongning felt her heart ache as she touched Mo Ting's face. "It's snowing over there. Bring a few extra layers of thick clothing." Mo Ting smiled. He did not care about the word tired. It all depended on who he was with. On the television, the entertainment news was following up on Lan Yu's disfigurement and drug charges. At the same time, Lan Yu's mother was taken to the police station for investigation for helping Lan Yu change her age. The netizens were filled with emotions. A young girl in the prime of her life had actually done something so outrageous. Since she was disfigured, she no longer deserved to be called Tongning. However, on the television, no one mentioned anything about Yongjing. After all, she was only an ex-manager of Chengtian. Even if she no longer worked as a manager, she could still change careers. But Mo Ting's most recent order to Lu Che was this morning. He instructed him to use the smallest possible method to notify the relevant industries. As long as Hai Rui was involved, they could not accept Yongjing and prevent her from taking even half a step into the entertainment industry. Without a high salary and benefits, he wanted to see how Yongjing could still be so vicious and arrogant. The next morning, Enzihao picked Tongning up for a meeting at Chengtian Entertainment. Just as they were about to enter the meeting room, they heard a clear voice, "Tongning." Tongning lifted her head to find a light blue silhouette walking towards her. As a model, she was naturally tall, but she didn't have long legs like Tongning. However, her facial features were well-defined and had a hint of foreign charm to her. Her eyes were a little blue. This was Li Danny. From the way she walked, it wasn't easy to tell what she was like. But, from the way she spoke, she sounded quite friendly. "Hello," Tongning nodded her head. "Are you here for the meeting?" "Uh-huh." Tongning was a little overwhelmed by the woman's familiarity. "Good luck then. I've seen your runway shows. You're really good." Tongning smiled without responding. At this time, Enzihao pushed open the office door and said to Tongning, "Let's go, we're running out of time." Li Danny watched as Tongning entered the meeting room with a thoughtful look. At this time, her assistant scoffed in mockery, "She's just an A-grade model, yet she doesn't know her place. Out of all the models in Chengtian, only Hua Yuan doesn't need to bow down to you. Who does Tongning think she is?" "Don't speak nonsense," Li Danny gently scolded her assistant. Yang Jie's resignation was obviously a trap set up by Tongning, Enzihao, and President Lan. The current vice president is nothing but an empty position. She won't receive any good resources. She caused us to lose Yang Jie. Li Danny didn't respond. Didn't Tang Ning have to go to Moscow for a magazine shoot? She was familiar with the photography team used by her vision. They had previously helped her shoot a blockbuster. When Tang Ning saw her, she didn't need to bow down to her. But she wasn't going to let Yang Jing's incident go so easily. Above all, in the past, she and Hua Yuan were fighting for resources. Now, with Tang Ning's involvement, why would she need to use the best manager? Who did she think she was? Who did she think she was? Chapter 144. I know you don't like to socialize, but your attitude towards Li Danny was too cold. And Zihao pulled out a chair and gestured for her to sit down. Although he knew she had a cold personality, Li Danny's status was already there for all to see. Tang Ning lifted her head and looked at Zihao. Her voice contained a sense of ridicule. If I treat her with passion, will she forget about the fact that I made her lose her manager? You're so confident that she won't blame it on me? I have to save face. And Zihao replied seriously. In terms of face, I've already done it. And Zihao choked as he helplessly shook his head. You entered Chengtian with such a grand ceremony and you are currently so popular. You are Li Danny and Hua Yuan's biggest competitor. We need to be careful. In other words, you're blocking more and more people's paths. This industry is fighting openly and covertly. You should at least let others play tricks behind your back and be a little more lenient. Tang Ning's gaze was clear, but it was a little cold. Plus, neither she nor Zihao expected Lan Shi would invite Luo Hao to the meeting. During this time, when they talked about Tang Ning's relationship, Lan Shi repeatedly reminded Tang Ning and Zihao to be careful. Most importantly, she turned her attention to Luo Hao. She knew Luo Hao and Tang Ning had already clashed many times. In the past, she didn't care, but now that Tang Ning was a model under her agency, she had to make sure Tang Ning didn't fall into the hands of her own people. Luo Hao, everything that happened to Tang Ning isn't just Zihao's fault. As the artist's director, you are also responsible. If anything happens to Tang Ning, you will be implicated as well. Luo Hao frowned, but still nodded at Lan Shi. I understand. In the end, Tang Ning and Zihao set off for Moscow. Meanwhile, Lan Shi looked at Luo Hao and decided to resolve the knot in their hearts. I know Zihao left a huge impact on you, but I hope you can let go of the past. I still need you. Luo Hao looked at Lan Shi. He couldn't tell if there was any sincerity in her eyes, so he tested. I want to know who the person behind Tang Ning is. What kind of terrifying force does it have? Influence. Lan Shi shook her head and smiled. Apart from the Tang family, what influence do you think Tang Ning has? If she had power, would she need to rely on Cheng Tian to slowly climb her way up? There's no such thing. Luo Hao had the same thought as Lan Shi, but he was still confused. Since that's the case, why do you allow Tang Ning to date? What's wrong with that? When the time comes, we can use it to cover up the scandal. I can't guarantee that everything will always be smooth sailing for Cheng Tian. As expected, Lan Shi wasn't that kind. Have you seen that man? No. But I don't think it will be exposed to the public. Tang Ning is very tight-lipped. So, I have no choice but to investigate on my own. But I haven't found anything yet. Luo Hao looked at Lan Shi with a look of mockery. If Lan Shi wanted to investigate, Mo Ting would obediently let her. Furthermore, you're delusional enough to use Big Boss to block the news. What right do you have? 12 p.m. And Zihao arrived at the airport early. He wanted to see who the man accompanying Tang Ning was. However, from the beginning to the end, all he saw was the disguised Tang Ning and Long Jie following behind her with her luggage. The man did not appear at all. As Mo Ting had directly taken the VIP passage, there was no way Zihao could see him. By the time Zihao boarded the plane, Mo Ting was already resting in the first-class cabin. Why was he so mysterious? Zihao even suspected the man was on a different flight. Inside the first-class cabin, Mo Ting hugged Tang Ning as he took a nap. Meanwhile, Tang Ning flipped through a magazine on the plane. As her gaze landed on the page about the diamond ring, her eyes flashed with a hint of desire. Mo Ting noticed her gaze, but he did not say a word. Although the two were husband and wife, their fingers were empty and they had not held a wedding ceremony. He needed to think of a way to allow her to wear the ring without being suspected of being a wedding ring. It seemed a little difficult, but not too difficult. Mo Ting thought back to Tang Ning's itinerary. In the end, he smiled as an idea formed in his mind. Sitting in economy class, An Zihao felt a little upset. This was the first time he had been abandoned by his own artist while working with a model. So, he kept thinking back to the happy times he had with Yun Xin a few years ago. But now, he was all alone. 8 hours of flight time wasn't long, but it wasn't short either. And Zihao once again walked to the front, hoping to see who the other party was. There was only one way to get off the plane. This time, he wasn't going to miss it, was he? But, the reality was, Tang Ning and Long Jie soon exited the plane without a man beside them. And Zihao couldn't possibly say he was going to wait for a while before leaving, right? Seeing An Zihao looking around, Tang Ning couldn't help but laugh. What are you looking at? I never thought you would have such a childish side to you. Don't you trust me? And Zihao finally voiced out the doubt in his heart. If Tang Ning really trusted him, she wouldn't have kept things from him even though Long Jie already knew about it. I don't trust you enough, Tang Ning replied simply. After all, you've caused me a lot of trouble in the past. And Zihao. Fine, I won't mention it again. But, where are we going to stay? And Zihao shrunk back a little and wrapped himself tightly in his down jacket. Do you also want to separate from us? You can make arrangements for you and Long Jie. I will naturally stay close to you. It won't affect my work. Tang Ning, do you think this is necessary? We will see each other sooner or later. Since we're already overseas, why can't we just be honest with each other? It was snowing lightly in Moscow and Tang Ning was afraid of the cold. Even though Mo Ting was fully prepared, she was still freezing. So, she hugged herself tightly and rubbed her palms together. Because of this action, Mo Ting saw it from behind and felt his heart ache. He immediately took off his coat and draped it over Tang Ning from behind. He then wrapped her in his embrace and carried her forward. Everything happened so quickly that An Zihao had no time to react. Who was that man just now? Who was the man with the domineering aura? Too bad he didn't get to see his face. And Zihao realized he was a little nervous. Ting. I know what you want to say, but I can't bear to see you in the cold. Mo Ting carried Tang Ning as he sped towards the Lincoln limousine at Dynasty Hotel. His own artist was being held hostage. How could An Zihao not follow closely behind? He and Long Jie walked side by side. As it was too cold, neither of them said a word. After all, they had already gotten to this point. Was there a need to worry about not seeing the person in person? Chapter 145. As they arrived at Dynasty Hotel, all they heard was the sound of a door closing. An Zihao and Long Jie had been locked outside by Mo Ting. All An Zihao could see was Mo Ting's back. Tang Ning was 178 centimeters tall, the standard figure of an international model. If she wore a pair of high heels, she would be 185 centimeters tall. A normal man standing next to her would be asking to be humiliated. Even An Zihao, who was 187 centimeters tall, didn't look much different when standing next to Tang Ning. But, this man, when he wrapped his arms around Tang Ning, he could actually make Tang Ning look like a little bird in front of him. Not only was his figure noticeable, but his aura was also noticeable. His inviolable dignity, unchallengeable strength and unapproachable danger gave An Zihao a sense of security. This man was definitely not an ordinary man. An Zihao was a little surprised as he turned around and looked at Long Jie. He rolled his eyes. I'm sure you already knew who this man was, right? With the heating in the hotel, Long Jie no longer had to hide under her down jacket. So, she peeked her eyes out and replied, of course. I've been by Tang Ning's side for 3 years. If you were a little more attentive to Tang Ning, he wouldn't need to come along. Are you saying he came because he was worried about Tang Ning? Of course, he's so busy. Every time he comes out, he has to finish his work a few days in advance. Long Jie naturally rolled her eyes at An Zihao. You saw it for yourself just now. He would rather freeze himself than let Tongning be exposed to the cold. If you were in his shoes, would you be able to do that? And Zihao had always thought the man behind Tongning wasn't someone that could be seen in public. Even if he was, he wouldn't be a big shot. But, after everything that had just happened, he had changed his mind. To be exact, he was a big shot. But, whether or not he could be seen in public, he wasn't sure. Let's go to the hotel we booked. And Zihao smiled. The shoot had been prepared for 2 days. He refused to believe that he wouldn't be able to see Tongning in person. In reality, as soon as the two left Dynasty, they realized the hotel they booked was right opposite Dynasty. If they wanted to see Tongning, all they had to do was make a phone call and no one would get suspicious. And Zihao stood by the window and looked at the magnificent building opposite him. He thought to himself, this man seems very capable. He is able to take everything into consideration for Tongning. Snow continued to fall on the streets of Moscow. From the moment they stepped into the room, Mo Ting turned the heater to the maximum and removed his jacket. He then placed Tongning's hands on his burning hot chest. Tongning struggled for a moment and shook her head. My hands are too cold, you will catch a cold. Then let's take a hot bath. Mo Ting pulled her into the bathroom and filled the tub with hot water. He hugged her and soaked in it until her limbs were warmed up. Do you feel better? Much better, Tongning replied as she leaned into Mo Ting's embrace. Moscow is so cold. If tomorrow's shoot is completely on location, then don't do it. It's okay, I can handle it. Even international supermodels couldn't be picky about the working environment. She was just an A-grade model. What qualifications did she have? She wasn't that delicate. You're already frozen like this, and you still say you're fine? Mo Ting looked at her nose that had turned red from the cold and immediately helped her apply a warm towel. I shouldn't have asked you to be on the cover of her vision. Tongning lifted her head and looked at Mo Ting's serious expression. She suddenly let out a laugh. You're still laughing. Seeing you nervous makes me happy. Tongning held onto Mo Ting's hand and placed it on her chest. Don't spoil me like this. I enjoy this process. Are you going to take away my rights? Mrs. Mo. Tongning did not say another word. She simply hooked her arms around Mo Ting's neck and gave him a kiss amidst the warm air. Of course, for a man, this was extremely effective. The night in Moscow was silent. Tongning lay in Mo Ting's embrace, enjoying the warmth in her body. If Mo Ting wasn't there, she couldn't imagine how much more difficult it would be for her. Meanwhile, opposite Dynasty Hotel, and Zihao was currently discussing with her Vision's filming team about their schedule for the next day. Since they were going overseas, they couldn't possibly shoot indoors. But, the weather in Moscow was extremely cold. To protect Tongning, and Zihao discussed with the cameraman to avoid shooting in the snow. If possible, they wanted to set up a few scenes. However, the cameraman simply replied, we know what we're doing. The theme for this issue of her Vision was ice and snow. Since it was an ice and snow theme, how could they not shoot in the snow? If you really know what you're doing, then do your best to keep warm. Even a big shot model doesn't have as many demands as you, the cameraman yelled angrily before hanging up the phone. Before they went overseas, they had already discussed this and their contract was clearly stated. So, how come, after they went overseas, they became big shot models and didn't have as many demands as they did? If it was any other manager, they would have already compromised. But, this was An Zihao. The word compromise did not exist in his dictionary. So, he directly gave Editor Lin a phone call. As soon as Editor Lin heard about how the cameraman was treating Tongning, she was so scared she broke out in a cold sweat. She immediately contacted the filming team. But, because of this, on the surface, the filming team were polite to An Zihao and Tongning, but behind the scenes, they were not willing to be taught a lesson. Which popular model hadn't experienced the cold and heat before? So, why did Tongning have to be treated in such a manner? Who wouldn't feel cold in a day like this? But, was An Zihao's request really too much? All he asked was for them to do their best to keep warm. Was that too much? The magazine was only going to shoot for one issue. After the shoot, the filming team's job would be done. But, for Tongning, if she was to get hurt from the cold, not only would her body suffer, her follow-up work would also be delayed. So, An Zihao had to ensure Tongning's safety. The next morning, Zihao woke up early and went to check out the location with the filming team. After confirming that it was within Tangning's acceptable range, he finally returned to the hotel. 9 a.m., Zihao gave Tangning a phone call and told her to get ready as the shoot would start at 10 a.m. Mo Ting looked out the window at the weather and patted Tangning on the head with a pained expression. "Don't worry, I've been in a cold pool for an entire day in the past. I can handle a cold like this. I'll drive you there. It's best if you don't go. I'm afraid you'll get angry." Tangning stopped Mo Ting. "Trust me, I'm not as weak as you think I am. This is something I have to experience. It's my job." Mo Ting did not say another word as he leaned against the desk in the room. He did not stop Tangning, but he did not allow her to stop him either. Even though he knew he would be angry and hurt if he saw her like this, he still followed behind Tangning's van. Chapter 146. 9:30 am. The entire filming crew arrived at the location. It was a jungle with tall trees, but all that was left were dark brown leaves. It gave off a desolate vibe. Snow covered the surroundings, and not far away, there was a frozen lake. However, from afar, one could see the unique style of Moscow's buildings. The colorful buildings made one feel better, and the weather was not as cold as it used to be. The filming crew set up a makeshift room for Tangning. But, as soon as Long Jie received the costume prepared by the sponsor, she immediately approached Zihao and the photographer. "Aren't we shooting a promotional video for the costume? In a seaside city with bone-chilling sea winds and -3 degrees below zero, how can we expect Tangning to wear a strapless gown? This season's shoot is called Snow and Ice. Not only will Tangning have to wear a thin dress, she will also have to walk barefoot across the frozen lake," the photographer yelled at Long Jie. "How many models have to do this? Only your family's model has so many things to do. I wonder if she's a professional model." As a model, when it came to clothing promotions, they would usually shoot an out-of-season shoot. In other words, they would wear a summer outfit in winter and a winter outfit in summer. This was especially true during Fashion Week. But her vision was only shooting for the front cover. In a situation like this, the sponsor would not make any special requests for the model. So, the photographer was in control. This is purely for the effect of the shoot. If your model feels she can't do it, she can give her vision a call. "You." Long Jie was speechless. All she could do was look at Zihao. Of course, Zihao didn't look too happy either. His eyes were dark and filled with suspicion. "If I find out you've been bribed by someone to deliberately mess with Tangning, I will make it impossible for you to survive in the photography industry." Hearing Zihao's warning, the photographer's expression turned a little unnatural. But he still maintained his composure. "Don't slander me. I've been a photographer for so many years, I've never met a model that's more difficult to deal with than Tangning. If you want to shoot, then do it. If not, then leave." "Of course I want to shoot." Tangning's voice emerged from behind them. "Tangning." Zihao reached out his hand to stop her, but she quickly pushed him away. "But, I want to ask, how long have you been in the industry?" 7 years. The photographer scoffed. "But I've been a model for 9 years." Tangning endured the cold and smiled. "In this industry, I have seen all kinds of dirty tricks and even life-threatening situations. Are you saying I am the most difficult model to deal with? I don't really believe it, but I understand the logic behind it. If you say that this is the best choice, I can believe you. But, please remember, I'm not someone who easily causes trouble, but I'm someone who will definitely take revenge. Since we can't understand each other, we can only go by the book. Whatever you say, we'll do." Tangning had always been cold, but when she said these words, she glared at the man with a bone-piercing coldness. As soon as the man saw the expression on Tangning's face, the overbearing aura he had a moment ago completely disappeared. After 9 years of hard work, she had met all kinds of people. Did they think that she was a newbie and could be easily fooled? The most difficult model to deal with? This photographer was just finding an excuse to provoke her. "Long Jie, give me my clothes." "Tangning." Long Jie hesitated. Tangning grabbed the clothes and looked at Long Jie with a comforting smile. The weather was already so cold, if they continued to waste time, they would just continue to be exposed to the cold wind. Mo Ting's car was parked not too far away. Seeing the argument, he immediately gave Long Jie a phone call. While Tang Ning was getting her makeup done, Long Jie found Mo Ting and boarded his car. What happened? Long Jie had a worried expression on her face as she explained the entire situation in detail. She even put in a few good words for Zihao, just in case the boss got angry and decided to vent his anger on everyone, and Zihao is actually a pretty good manager. He arrived early this morning to check on the filming environment. Tell Tang Ning not to take the shoot. Tell her it was my idea. Long Jie got out of the car and relayed Mo Ting's words to Tang Ning. However, Tang Ning asked Long Jie to ask Mo Ting, "You want me to run away willfully?" She was a model, so she had to listen to arrangements. This was understandable. If she left like this, the consequences would not be something she could control. Even if someone wanted to frame her, she still had to grit her teeth and get through it. Most importantly, Mo Ting was here. She could enjoy his warmth, but it wasn't an excuse to run away from her responsibilities. What if Mo Ting was never by her side? After receiving her answer, Mo Ting gave Tang Ning a phone call and simply said, "You can continue filming, but after you finish, the entire team will lose their jobs." Mo Ting was angry. From his tone, Tang Ning could tell that Mo Ting had never been harsh towards her. He only acted like the Mo Ting that everyone was familiar with. "Don't worry, I know what I'm doing." Tang Ning put down her phone. At this time, Zihao, who was standing behind her, saw the caller ID, 0819. It turned out, this man was simply a number on Tang Ning's phone. Of course, he had no idea, 0819 was Tang Ning and Mo Ting's wedding anniversary. What's wrong? Is he worried? Worried, Tang Ning nodded. Tang Ning nodded her head as a helpless smile appeared on her face. "I really hope he's not nearby. Otherwise, after I get changed and leave, he might be so angry that he might kill someone. Since that's the case, why hasn't he stepped out to protect you?" And Zihao looked at her suspiciously. "He's already protected me enough. But, this is my career, I can rely on myself." And Zihao did not say anything else. Perhaps, he had underestimated Tang Ning and the man beside her. From the time he first came into contact with Tang Ning, all he knew was that this woman was self-disciplined, planned, and ambitious, but she also had her own bottom line. She didn't make the first move, but she wasn't weak either. In fact, every move she made was deadly and vengeful. But, the reality was, she was so pure that she didn't want to rely on external forces to achieve her goals. From the looks of it, the public's assumptions about her were all wrong. "Since you've put it this way, I don't think there's any reason for me to stop you," and Zihao smiled. "Go out, I'm going to get changed." And Zihao nodded his head and left the changing room. Meanwhile, Tang Ning gathered her courage and put on the champagne-colored strapless dress. It was cold, so cold that it was bone-piercing. But, Tang Ning still held onto her dress and walked out of the changing room. Afterwards, under the photographer's request, she walked barefoot onto the frozen lake. The photographer sneered from behind the camera. He wanted to see if Tang Ning could last 5 minutes in such harsh weather. Chapter 147. The cold wind howled as it rustled through the trees. It felt like it was mixed with ice as it hit one's face, sending a bone-piercing chill down one's spine. The photographer held onto a glass of water while his assistant and staff held onto hand warmers. Everyone looked at Tang Ning like they were about to watch a good show. Normally, when a photographer was about to teach a model a lesson, it was always going to be a great show. Before Tang Ning started filming, she lowered her head and whispered something into Zihao's ear. Afterwards, she followed Long Jie to the designated location. Long Jie looked down at her feet as her expression changed. "The ice on the surface of this lake isn't sturdy at all. If you stay on it for too long, it will crack." After hearing Long Jie's yell, the photographer roared, "I've already said it before. If you want to film, then film. If you don't, then leave. You." Long Jie pointed at the photographer. The anger in her chest was about to burst out. "Forget it. Tang Ning's expression remained the same, telling Long Jie not to get angry. However, no one noticed the deep fire in her clear eyes. But, you are in danger. I know what I'm doing. Seeing Tang Ning compromise, the photographer's lips curved into a mocking smile. At least she was smart enough to know that the photographer couldn't be offended. All day long, she thought she was a supermodel and went around putting on airs. He wanted Tang Ning to know she was nothing. Here, Tang Ning, get ready. Let's start filming from the distance. And Zihao held onto his phone as he looked at the photographer. He had asked Tang Ning to stand barefoot on the surface of the lake while he stood on the shore to film. What kind of photographer worked like this? And Zihao looked at the trembling Tang Ning, who still had a stubborn smile on his face. He subconsciously moved forward as he said to the photographer, "We're not filming anymore. Manager An, do you know what you're saying?" The photographer immediately turned around and questioned An Zihao. You need to be clear. If Tang Ning leaves now, does she still want to keep her professional image? Isn't she just standing on the ice? I haven't even asked her to jump yet. You want her to jump? Long Jie shrieked in disbelief. What? Isn't jumping a normal action when taking photos? The photographer put down his camera and laughed arrogantly. The ice is about to crack. Isn't it still intact? Hearing this, Tang Ning suddenly lifted her feet and said to Long Jie, get me some clothes and shoes. Long Jie reacted for a moment and immediately rushed into the changing room to retrieve Tang Ning's clothes. However, someone had soaked her clothes and they had already frozen into a block of ice. Tang Ning did not wait for a change of clothes. Instead, she walked away from the ice with her head held high, completely ignoring the photographer. Tang Ning, do you still want to be a model? Are you tired of living? Seeing that Tang Ning had really gone on strike, the photographer suddenly panicked. Originally, he simply wanted to mess with Tang Ning because he knew her visions shoot was extremely important to Tang Ning's career. He was confident that Tang Ning would endure it. But, he never expected, even though Tang Ning could endure it, she wouldn't be like steamed bun, enduring everything. Tang Ning left the lake and approached the staff. Even though she was only wearing a thin dress, her chin was still raised high. This was the Tang Ning that refused to admit defeat. Am I tired of living, or are you the one tired of living? Tang Ning took the phone from An Zihao's hand and showed the cameraman the footage she had just recorded. I don't know who your financial backer is and I don't want to know. But, if this video is leaked, do you think your team will be kicked out of the photography industry? We didn't do anything to you. The photographer said angrily. We'll know once we send it out and let everyone judge for themselves. Tang Ning, have you made a mistake? You should be the one begging us, not the other way around. I never beg others, I only beg myself. After speaking, Tang Ning placed her gaze on Long Jie. However, Long Jie replied angrily, her clothes have already frozen. There's no way she can wear them. And Zihao removed his jacket. Just as he was about to help Tang Ning put it on, Tang Ning turned to look at the photographer. Seeing his face turn green and red, she walked towards him barefoot. I have no grudges with you, must you go this far? How would I know what's going on? Don't you know? Tang Ning's gaze was extremely cold, sending shivers down everyone's spines. Perhaps the photographer had been forced into a corner, so he pushed Tang Ning aside and said arrogantly, Who do you think you are, Tang Ning? You're just an old model, did you think I don't need you? Let me tell you, Tang Ning, with your attitude, I bet you will never be able to become a supermodel. Hearing this, not only Tang Ning, but An Zihao and Long Jie were also angered. However, Long Jie did not forget to find something warm for Tang Ning. Just as An Zihao was about to pull Tang Ning behind him and teach the photographer a lesson, a black windbreaker suddenly appeared on Tang Ning's body. A moment later, everyone looked at the man that had appeared in front of them in surprise. It was Mo Ting. It was the CEO of Hai Rui Entertainment, Mo Ting. His car was parked behind them, but no one had seen when he had appeared. It really was Mo Ting. Everyone thought their eyes were playing tricks on them, including An Zihao. Meanwhile, Long Jie knew her savior had appeared, so she immediately took off her shoes and asked Tang Ning to put them back on. She then found a place to sit down and wait for the show to start. Everyone was shocked. They couldn't understand why they would run into Mo Ting at a place like this. Mo. Mo. President Mo? The photographer anxiously tried to confirm Mo Ting's identity, but Mo Ting completely ignored him. Not only did he wrap the windbreaker around Tongning, he also wrapped a scarf tightly around her face. And Zihao looked at Mo Ting from the side and suddenly understood. This back. This familiar back. This back that he had been following the entire time, Tongning's man, the man that Tongning was trying to hide, was actually the CEO of Hai Rui, Mo Ting, and Zihao was no less surprised than the other staff. He had never expected Tongning to have a background like this. Who would have expected a protective umbrella like this? The model that had been slandered the entire time was actually the woman of the CEO of Hai Rui. Afterwards, Zihao calmed down. This was in line with Tongning's personality. If she wanted something, she didn't like to rely on others. She wanted to take things one step at a time. This was probably the main reason why she hid her relationship with Mo Ting from the public. After all, if their relationship was revealed to the public, she would no longer be known as the model, but as Mo Ting's girlfriend. But, did Mo Ting think she was just playing around? Or was he serious? Chapter 148. From the moment Mo Ting appeared, the photographer was initially excited. But, as time passed, he began to feel a sense of panic spread through his heart. From the looks of it, Mo Ting and Tongning's relationship wasn't simple. If that was the case, based on what he had just done, Mo Ting was more than enough to kill him 1,000 times over. I feel a lot better. Tongning felt warmth as she turned to the busy Mo Ting. Thank you, President Mo. Seeing Tongning's expression had softened, Mo Ting finally took a step back and said, I was passing by and saw you shooting a magazine. Why are you standing barefoot on a lake in such cold weather? Tongning froze for a moment before understanding that Mo Ting was going to settle the score with her. So, she smiled, this is something a model has to endure. Really? Mo Ting asked with a deeper meaning. He then turned to face the photographer and asked calmly, what scene are you shooting? Since I'm free today, since I've bumped into Tongning, I might as well pay her a visit. The photographer's expression immediately darkened. He never imagined that Tongning and Mo Ting's relationship would be so good. Why are you looking down? You didn't react like this when you were talking to Tongning just now, Mo Ting asked in a deep voice. What? Are you surprised? Didn't you know that Tongning and I are friends? I didn't know. I didn't know. The photographer felt like his tongue was about to freeze. He couldn't even form a complete sentence. Is that a valid reason for you to bully Tongning? Mo Ting's voice suddenly rose in a cold and authoritative tone. What were you shooting just now? I noticed Tongning was only wearing a summer dress and she was standing barefoot on the ice. President Mo. I didn't do it on purpose, I didn't know. The photographer hurriedly explained. He was completely different from the arrogant man from before. In that case, let's continue filming, Mo Ting suddenly said as he turned to look at Long Jie. Long Jie immediately understood as she brought over 2 chairs and placed them behind Mo Ting and Tongning so they could sit down. It's been a long time since I've seen an outdoor shoot like this. Let's continue. The photographer glanced at Tongning. Just as he was about to tell Mo Ting that Tongning had already decided to back out of the shoot, the reason they were arguing over this, Mo Ting added, plus, I love watching photographers demonstrate. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone's faces turned exceptionally ugly. They knew that the photographer's retribution had arrived. Hearing this, the cameraman's face turned pale. President Mo, this is too cold. Even Tongning hasn't complained about the cold. As a man, how could you complain about the cold? Mo Ting's words were harsh and cold. Not only that, but his words were clearly suppressing his anger. Everyone could tell that Mo Ting was going to stand up for Tongning today. Of course, the photographer was well aware that the man was the CEO of Hai Rui. If he resisted, then it was very likely that he would face unemployment from this moment on. Therefore, he could only bury his head and compromise. Everyone watched as the photographer stripped off his clothes, leaving only a pair of boxers on his lower body. He didn't even dare to wear socks as he braved the cold wind and walked towards the icy lake. However, a moment later, the photographer was so cold that he wanted to jump back onto the shore. But, Mo Ting asked, You haven't even started taking photos yet." The photographer froze in place. Even though the soles of his feet were bone-chilling, he still did not have the courage to jump onto the shore. At this time, Mo Ting suddenly asked without looking at anyone, "Who wet Tongning's clothes?" Everyone at the scene trembled as the stylists looked at each other. In the end, they all pointed out the culprit. A fashionable woman in her early 30s lowered her head in fear. But Mo Ting had no intention of letting her off the hook. So, he said to everyone present, "Pour all the water in your hands on her body. Otherwise, you will have to bear the consequences." These were all people that had bullied and mocked Tongning in the past. Did they think he would let them off? If he hadn't personally witnessed the humiliation that Tongning had suffered, he would have let her endure it. But, since he had encountered her, he was going to clean her up. The staff hesitated, but they were afraid of Hai Rui's anger. So, they all approached the stylist and poured the hot water in their cups on the woman. "Sorry, we were forced to do this. Sorry." The woman's eyes turned red, but she did not dare to cry out loud. Meanwhile, the photographer on the ice was feeling a little uncomfortable. Originally, he wanted to jump a little to warm himself up, but all he heard was a cracking sound as the ice actually split open and the photographer fell into the water. In an instant, he almost fainted from the cold. The staff quickly scooped him up and wrapped him in a down jacket. But, even with this, his body was still turning purple from the cold. Seeing the photographer on the verge of death, Mo Ting was finally satisfied. He stood up and said to everyone, "I've said it before, I can't stand people that use dirty methods. Do you think a mere photographer can stir up a storm? Do you really think you have the ability? From now on, if any magazine dares to hire you, I will make them close down." Also, today's incident was a coincidence. Tongning is a friend that I can get along with. I don't like strange rumors going around. You guys better watch your mouths. After speaking, Mo Ting stood up with Tongning and glanced at the surrounding staff with a warning look in his eyes. It wasn't until they looked away guiltily that Mo Ting and Tongning turned to leave. And Zihao followed behind Long Jie and followed closely behind Tongning and Mo Ting. "Photographer, are you okay?" Seeing the photographer's body turning purple, one of the staff immediately called an ambulance. The photographer looked at their backs and was speechless. He was so regretful that his intestines turned green. Who would have thought? Mo Ting was exactly like the rumors said. When it came to killing people, he was swift and ruthless. "Li Danny, you've caused my death this time." Before the photographer fainted, he thought to himself. "Tongning had such a strong backing, yet you asked me to act recklessly?" On the way home, Zihao drove while Tongning and Mo Ting sat in the back seat. Zihao looked at Mo Ting through the rearview mirror and thought to himself, the man a moment ago was indeed the ruthless CEO of Hai Rui. However, he never imagined, in private, Mo Ting and Tongning interacted in such a way. Chapter 149. The fierceness between Mo Ting's brows had long disappeared. All that remained was worry and helplessness. He wrapped Tongning's feet in his unbuttoned shirt and rubbed her palms until her limbs were warm again. Only then did he gently let go of her feet and looked at her with a deep gaze. "I'm fine," Tongning quickly replied. Afraid Mo Ting wouldn't believe her, she emphasized, "Really?" Seeing Mo Ting did not respond, she continued to explain, "I am an A-grade model. You should know better than anyone that I am not a kind person. I didn't get to where I am today by enduring, I know what I am doing. So, can you not be so worried?" Mo Ting remained silent. He simply turned his gaze and stared at Zihao through the rearview mirror. Zihao had to admit, out of all the people he had come into contact with, not a single man had a sharper expression than Mo Ting. In front of Tongning, he could be gentle, but in front of outsiders, he had to be the ruler, he was the king. Up until this moment, Zihao still couldn't believe this man was the man behind Tongning. "I will call her Vision and ask them to send a new photography team over." Zihao quickly said, "Use our own photography team. As for the money, I will pay." "Her Vision only has one team left and they have already been eliminated," Mo Ting said coldly. "I remember Cheng Tian has a photography team called Fearless. Although they are part of Cheng Tian, they have been following Li Danny and Hua Yuan around all these years. The agency has long acknowledged them as their private photography team, and Zihao explained. From Mo Ting's words, it seemed he wanted to fight with Li Danny and Hua Yuan for a photography team. Plus, President Mo, Cheng Tian is someone else's agency. You know Cheng Tian better than anyone else. What's going on? Contact them. Mo Ting's voice was cold. If you dare to make moves behind someone's back, then you should know what it means to pay the price. And Zihao's expression froze. Could it be that Mo Ting already knew who the rich man behind the photographer was? However, Mo Ting's words reminded Zihao that Tongning was now a part of Cheng Tian and was being heavily nurtured. She naturally had the right to enjoy the best resources. Plus, from what he knew, Li Danny did not have any activities recently. In other words, the team was currently resting. Since they were Cheng Tian's resources, what would happen if he used them? Tongning felt a little helpless. Mo Ting would rather talk to Zihao than turn to look at her. She knew Mo Ting was truly angry, but there were too many people in the car, so she did not say much. After returning to Dynasty Hotel, Tongning wrapped her arms around Mo Ting from behind. She wanted to explain everything to him, but Mo Ting suddenly received a phone call from Lu Che. Not long after, he grabbed his jacket and left the house. On the table was a note he left for a business partner. And Zihao and Long Jie returned to the hotel opposite. However, as they neared their rooms, they stopped in their tracks. It was obvious they wanted to say something. Seeing Zihao's expression, Long Jie couldn't help but let out a gentle laugh. She placed her hands behind her back and raised an eyebrow. If you have any questions, ask away. I want to know, is President Mo married? Is his relationship with Tongning serious, or is it just a game? Yes. Long Jie replied casually. Then, Tongning is still with him. In that case, listen carefully. The person he is married to is Tongning. They are husband and wife. Long Jie rolled her eyes. When I first found out, I was even more surprised than you. I thought Tongning was trying to get back at her jerk ex by marrying an old man. It was only later that I found out the man she married was Big Boss. But, Tongning doesn't want to reveal it to the public. So, they are keeping their marriage a secret. When Zihao heard this answer, he let out a soft laugh. How much more did Tongning hide from him? And Zihao, it hasn't been easy for Tongning to get to where she is today. She has relied on her own hard work to get to where she is today. Although she is Big Boss's wife, she is also a professional model. So, I hope you can treat her the same as before. And Zihao glanced at Long Jie and realized she really understood Tongning. I will keep this matter to myself. And Zihao had no intention of giving Tongning special treatment. If Tongning was someone that was eager for quick success, she would have plenty of ways to succeed. There was no need for her to fight like this. But, the reality was, Tongning was herself. Even though she was married to Mo Ting, she still had her own light. But, the fact that Tongning's husband was Mo Ting was still a surprise. Did you think she had a man living off a woman? In the end, she ended up marrying the most powerful man in the entertainment industry. Jane. Straight. No. Dare. Believe. Yes. And Zihao felt like his face was swollen from being slapped by Tongning. Of course, this wasn't the first time he had been slapped in the face by Tongning. Because of the incident with the photography team, her vision's shoot was temporarily put on hold. Tongning didn't know how Mo Ting communicated with her vision, but at least, news of Mo Ting dealing with the photographer had not reached Beijing. In fact, no one had even heard of it. This had always been Mo Ting's way of doing things. If he wanted to do something, there was nothing he couldn't do. Tongning sighed as she continued to wait for Mo Ting. It wasn't until late at night that Mo Ting finally returned to the hotel. As soon as he lifted his head, he saw Tongning standing on the balcony in her thin clothes. He immediately grabbed a blanket and wrapped it around Tongning. Are you trying to anger me to death? Huh? Tongning let out a gentle laugh and replied, no one is trying to anger you to death. You are the one making things difficult for yourself. Mo Ting looked at her with a gloomy expression. But, Tongning took the opportunity to hold onto his hand and explained in seriousness, you know I need you more than anyone else. Because I need you, I don't want you to help me in this way. I understand what you are thinking, but I can't stand by and watch you suffer. If you were in my position, would you be able to stand by and watch me get bullied? Tongning lowered her head and thought for a moment before replying, I wouldn't be able to do that either. But Mo Ting will never allow himself to be bullied. If that day ever comes, you wouldn't want me to see you in such a sorry state. So, I won't appear in front of you because that is your pride. Mo Ting froze. What Tongning said was the truth. But I will definitely remember those that have bullied you. I will think of a way to make them pay even if I have to die with them. I won't let them live a better life than you. After hearing these powerful words, Mo Ting's handsome face finally softened a little as he pulled Tongning into his embrace. If you simply want me to not interfere with your life, then you've successfully convinced me. But watching you teach that photographer a lesson today was quite satisfying, Tongning praised in seriousness. She then placed her cheek against Mo Ting's chest. Ting, wait for me a little longer. Mo Ting tightened his arms around Tongning and whispered into her ear, haven't I been waiting for you? Chapter 150. And Zihao had been waiting for Lan Shi's phone call. He had already mobilized Cheng Tian's photography team and obtained her vision support and assistance to help Tongning complete her November magazine shoot as soon as possible. Logically speaking, with the incident between her vision and the model, the news would have already been all over the internet. But editor Lin and Zihao had a tacit understanding. Because Zihao was caught in the middle, her vision had no choice but to listen to Zihao's arrangements. Not to mention, this time, it was her vision's photographer who deliberately messed with Tongning. Late at night, Lan Shi finally received a phone call. However, the first thing she said was to question Zihao, why didn't you discuss this with me first before using the company's photography team? Zihao froze for a moment as the smile on his face quickly disappeared. In a serious tone, he replied, because her vision made things difficult for Tongning and she had a falling out with the photographer. Zihao, you know Fearless has always been used by Li Danny. Can you imagine how awkward I felt when Li Danny asked me about it? Lan Shi asked as she suppressed her anger. Because time was tight, I thought. No matter how tight time is, the company's rules and regulations cannot be thrown away. I'll let it go this time, but I hope there won't be a next time, Lan Shi warned. Zihao was silent for a few seconds before he suddenly said, Lan Shi, I suddenly don't understand you. Lan Shi realized her attitude was too bad, so she quickly tried to comfort him. If you were in my position, you would know how difficult it is for me. Zihao sneered and did not say another word. But Zihao could clearly sense the change in Lan Shi. So, that night, he did not rest at all as he carefully studied the relationship between Tongning and Mo Ting, as well as Tongning's journey to where she was today. It seemed, Tongning's change began from the Crown Star fashion show. From then on, it wasn't hard to tell that Mo Ting had more or less become involved in Tongning's career. Firstly, on the day of the Crown Star fashion show, Tongning's identity was exposed. Secondly, at the Bright Night show, they took a photo together. Thirdly, Han Ruoshua slandered Tongning for using Mo Ting to create hype and Hai Rui released a statement to slap Tongning in the face. Lastly, during the bed climbing incident, Hai Rui's artist's director spoke up for Tongning. He even said Mo Ting didn't care about Tongning. In reality, Mo Ting had already done a lot behind the scenes. Looking back at Tongning's journey into Cheng Tian, when Lan Shi first heard Tongning wanted to sign with Creative Entertainment, she did not insist. Afterwards, the only reason she signed Tongning was because of Yongjing and Luo Hao's provocation. Now that no one dared to challenge her authority as CEO, she began to be cautious and wary of Tongning. The only reason he had returned was to restrain Luo Hao. He and Lan Shi had fought side by side for many years. Although he understood that it wasn't easy for a woman like Lan Shi to manage such a big entertainment company, being played around like a chess piece was not a pleasant feeling. Today, he had only used a photography team. If things got a little bigger, how would Lan Shi react? He couldn't imagine it. The next morning, Zihao was just about to head to the airport to pick up the photography team and her visions manager. However, Mo Ting asked Long Jie to tell him to wait in the hotel lobby. Zihao made some time to sit down in the hotel's luxurious lobby. Not long after, he saw Mo Ting sitting opposite him dressed in a black trench coat. And Zihao didn't understand Mo Ting's intention, so he waited for him to speak. After removing his leather gloves, Mo Ting leaned back on the sofa with an imposing aura. I'm sure you are well aware of my relationship with Tongning. But, it is time for you to make a decision. I don't quite understand. You don't understand? Mo Ting looked into Zihao's eyes and said coldly, Cheng Tian is merely Tongning's stepping stone. As for what land she sees Tongning, I think you are well aware. Mo Ting wanted Zihao to make a choice between Lan Shi and Tongning. If he wholeheartedly supported Tongning, then his relationship with Lan Shi was bound to go to a dead end. After all, when a manager's heart wasn't with the agency, it would be the agency's biggest problem. Plus, Zihao wasn't Long Jie. Between men, they were more meticulous. So, Mo Ting needed to be careful. But, even though Lan Shi wasn't the same Lan Shi from before, their relationship was still there. So, it was impossible for Zihao to betray Lan Shi all of a sudden. Give me some time to think about it. Up to you. Mo Ting knew, the more Zihao hesitated, the higher his expectations of Lan Shi would be and the greater his disappointment would be. Does Tongning know about this? What do you think? Mo Ting asked Zihao. Zihao couldn't help but laugh. Tongning has always been the most clear-headed. Regardless of everything, Zihao's biggest wish was for Tongning to become a supermodel. As for his conflict with Lan Shi, it could wait for now. So, her vision's shoot went relatively smoothly. However, Li Danny had asked her more than once about Lan Shi. President Lan, Tongning borrowed my team. Does she not plan to return it? Danny, you should know that this team belongs to the agency. So, it's understandable that Zihao used it, Lan Shi explained. I understand. Li Danny sneered as she angrily stormed out of Lan Shi's office. She already knew about the incident with her vision's photographer. However, he didn't dare to say anything about Mo Ting. So, Li Danny simply assumed that Tongning had replaced her own photography team. But, so what if the shoot was successful? It would only count if it was successfully released on the market. Zihao could guess what expression Li Danny had on her face. But, there was one thing he needed to learn from Tongning. If he met a god, he would slay a god. If he met a Buddha, he would slay a Buddha. After their trip to Moscow, Tongning was scheduled to film a promotional advertisement for a famous jewelry brand. Tongning was looking forward to it. However, the night before they returned to China, Zihao found out that Tongning was only going to endorse the brand's wedding ring line, while Li Danny was going to be the global spokesperson. It seemed, Li Danny wanted to use this method to show Tongning what it meant to be an international model and what it meant to be an A-grade model. Zihao originally wanted to reject a portion of the endorsement, but Tongning told him, accept it. But, by doing this, it was obvious to the public that Tongning was below Li Danny. In fact, the gap wasn't just a small one. Zihao looked at Mo Ting, hoping he would say something to stop Tongning. But, Mo Ting uncharacteristically supported Tongning. Why? Because he had a plan. Zihao, I don't have the energy to compete with her right now. I simply want to challenge myself. Plus, I really like this jewelry brand. Tongning had no idea what Mo Ting was planning. She simply told Zihao in seriousness. Do you like it? As long as you like it. Mo Ting thought without batting an eyelid. Chapter 151. After her vision's shoot was completed, Mo Ting arranged for a few people to secretly return to China. Afterwards, Tongning and Zihao reported to Cheng Tian while Mo Ting headed straight to Hai Rui Entertainment to deal with the work he had accumulated over the past few days. As he lowered his eyes, he suddenly remembered something as he called Lu Che into his office. President. Help me contact the CEO of LM, I want to meet with him, Mo Ting instructed as he signed some documents. Does the president want to order a wedding ring? Lu Che guessed. LM's full name was Lovemore. It was an old jewelry brand that originated in Italy and had over 100 years of history. Its design had always been famous for being unique and precious. Sort of. After saying these two words, Mo Ting lifted his head and warned Lu Che, watch your mouth. Lu Che smiled and nodded his head as he made a gesture that signaled he would keep his mouth shut. But, even if I order one, the madam can't wear it. That's not something you should be worried about. Since he could order a wedding ring, of course, Tongning could wear it without hesitation. Meanwhile, Zihao and Tongning arrived at Chengtian Entertainment. As soon as the employees saw them, they looked at each other strangely. Zihao and Tongning looked at each other without saying a word until they entered the office and saw Lan Shi. You've worked hard, Tongning. Lan Shi stood up from her seat and walked over to Tongning as she patted the back of her hand. But, you can't stop your schedule. In 2 days, LM will be shooting for a commercial. They have already sent us the information of the male celebrity you will be working with. It is actor Ling Feng. Tongning, he is currently a very popular actor. You need to grab hold of this opportunity. Tongning received the information from Lan Shi and smiled gently. I recognize this actor. Although he is only in his early 20s, he has already been involved in numerous scandals with women, and Zihao furrowed his brows as he received the information from Tongning. Isn't it a good idea to promote each other? Lan Shi disagreed. But, you know Tongning. And Zihao did not say the second half of his sentence because he knew Lan Shi would be unhappy. She obviously knew Tongning already had a lover, yet she still wanted Tongning to accept an actress to create hype. Was this what Lan Shi meant when she said she would give Tongning the best resources? It's decided then. I have a dinner with Ling Feng tonight. You guys go back and rest first to get used to the jet lag. We'll meet at the dinner at 8 p.m. Tongning turned around and glanced at Zihao without saying a word. From an outsider's perspective, she appeared to be a submissive person. But, Zihao knew, she definitely wouldn't create hype. If she wanted to, she wouldn't still be an A-grade model. President Lan, do you not have confidence in me? Tongning, you're already 26. If you don't make the most of your time, when will you be able to achieve something else? Lan Shi directly used her age as an excuse. I'm doing this so you can relax a little. Tongning's gaze turned cold as she looked at Lan Shi with a sharp gaze. President Lan, I know Tongning, you have your own ideas. But, you need to trust me, this industry is dirtier than you think. So, no one is going to give up such a good opportunity. You can't either, Lan Shi interrupted as she used her identity as the CEO to pressure Tongning. Tongning continued to look at Lan Shi without a word. However, Zihao suddenly stepped in between the two women. Lan Shi, you may be the CEO, but Tongning is still my artist. If you decide on Tongning's schedule so casually, what else do you want me to do? Lan Shi looked at Zihao with a complex expression. It was as though her partner of many years had unknowingly started to have feelings for someone else. Plus, Tongning has already suffered so much in Moscow. Her body isn't feeling well. Let her get some rest. Okay, Tongning nodded. Lan Shi endured for a moment before she said to Tongning, go home with your assistant first. Zihao and I still have a few things to discuss. And Zihao glanced at Tongning, gesturing for her not to worry. Tongning nodded her head as she turned and left Lan Shi's office without looking back. She had no intention of fawning over Lan Shi. All of a sudden, only Lan Shi and Zihao were left in the office. The atmosphere was a little awkward, but Lan Shi couldn't hold back her anger. You've only just started and you're already disobeying my orders? And Zihao shook his head as he looked at Lan Shi seriously. Lan Shi, if Tongning wanted to use someone to create hype, she wouldn't have considered joining Chengtian. Chengtian Entertainment has always disdained doing things like this. When did this start? Lan Shi's expression changed slightly. Plus, the contract states that Tongning has the right to reject any of your suggestions. You haven't forgotten, right? Tongning is so patient, why do you have to be so aggressive? Lan Shi remained silent for quite some time. In the end, she looked into Zihao's eyes and said, Zihao, have you been tamed by Tongning? I haven't been tamed by anyone. It's just that, you are no longer the original Lan Shi, and Zihao replied without backing down. In that case, who is going to attend tonight's banquet? I will think of a way to explain things to them. And Zihao couldn't possibly allow Tongning to attend. Otherwise, the news would be all over the news the next day and he couldn't allow Lan Shi to lose face. After all, she was the CEO. Hearing this, Lan Shi's expression softened a little. In the end, she simply said one sentence with deep meaning, I'm suddenly starting to regret signing Tongning. That's because you realize Tongning doesn't listen to you. After speaking, Zihao stood up from the sofa. However, his heart was slowly starting to feel disappointed. He didn't know when Cheng Tian and Lan Shi had become like this. After leaving the office, Tongning waited for Zihao at the entrance. Their eyes met. They both understood each other. I've made things difficult for you. You didn't do anything wrong. Otherwise, if you compromised and went out for dinner today, I would have arranged for you to sell your body tomorrow, Zihao replied. Tongning, I know what you want. I will definitely give you what you want. Tongning sighed and let out a laugh. I originally thought there was a place in the industry that wasn't so dirty. There is, your husband's company. Zihao winked at Tongning. Tongning let out a gentle laugh. With my current status, it's still acceptable for me to compete with people of the same level. If I continue to go against Lan Shi like this, then I won't have a good ending in the future. Since I've become your manager, I will take care of everything. Zihao promised. All you need to do is walk your runway and shoot your magazine. That's all. Thank you. Take a look at LM's information. We'll be shooting the commercial in 2 days. We will be shooting 2 days later, Zihao said as he shoved his right hand into his pocket. But, before that, I need to deal with that playboy Ling Feng. Chapter 152. After leaving Cheng Tian, Tongning did not directly return home. She originally wanted to go to Hai Rui to see Mo Ting. But, as she arrived downstairs, Lu Che told her over the phone that Mo Ting wasn't at the office. Tongning parked her car in the garage but did not leave immediately. She thought about the conflict between her and Lan Shi and had a complicated look in her eyes. Not long after, Long Jie suddenly patted Tongning on the arm and pointed out the car window. Tongning followed Long Jie's line of sight and realized the people in the garage were Mo Ting and Lu Che. Lu Che, didn't you say Big Boss wasn't at the office? Long Jie asked anxiously as she looked at Tongning's expression. After the incident with Han Yufan, Long Jie was afraid Tongning would get hurt again. She especially didn't like it when Tongning was lied to. Tongning watched as Mo Ting and Lu Che left without much change in expression. She simply looked at Long Jie and felt she was making a big deal out of nothing. You're overthinking things. Aren't you afraid at all? Tongning did not say anything. She simply pulled out her phone and gave Mo Ting a call. As soon as Mo Ting picked up, she asked, "Where were you just now? Were you checking on me?" Mo Ting's lips curved upwards after hearing Tongning's question. In that case, do you want me to check on you? I was at the office just now. I'm heading out to meet a business partner, Mo Ting replied gently. A moment ago, Lu Che said you weren't at the office. Mo Ting lifted his head and looked at Lu Che, who was driving with a sharp gaze. He then replied, I didn't order you to do that. Are you still at Hai Rui? Tongning's voice sounded a little pitiful. In that case, I'll turn around and pick you up. I'll let you vent some of your anger on Lu Che. Okay. After hanging up the phone, Mo Ting placed his phone in his pocket and glared at Lu Che. Should I reevaluate your abilities? Lu Che. I'm going to say this one last time, don't lie to Tongning, even if it's something as simple as whether I'm around or not. If Tongning hadn't called me and kept this question to herself, over time, how do you think our relationship as a married couple would have gone? Lu Che felt a little guilty as he quickly apologized. Sorry, President, I simply didn't know what excuse I could come up with to stop the madam. I didn't ask you to come up with an excuse to brush her off. As long as you don't say anything, she won't notice. I understand. Lu Che was indeed outstanding at work, but sometimes his EQ wasn't there. This was the main reason why he still didn't have a girlfriend. Mo Ting gestured for Lu Che to turn around and successfully picked up Tongning. He then pulled her into his embrace and said, I never told Lu Che to say I wasn't around. I know, Tongning nodded. Otherwise, do you think I should trust him more? Lu Che lowered his head in guilt. Mo Ting stroked Tongning's hair in satisfaction as he replied, Of course you trust me more. But, it's already been 20 minutes since you called Lu Che and he still hasn't left the car park. Did something happen? Tongning froze for a moment. She didn't expect Mo Ting to be so attentive. So, she explained everything that happened at Cheng Tian from start to finish. The reason I haven't left is because I'm thinking about the huge conflict between Lan Shi and myself. If this continues, we will definitely fall out. The incident with Ling Feng is just the beginning. Plus, Luo Hao and Li Danny are also involved. Mo Ting listened quietly. Right now, his identity was that of a husband listening to his wife's worries. He then reached out his hand to comfort her and give her courage. Ning, you seem to have forgotten, your ultimate goal is Star King. Cheng Tian's purpose is simply to help you make the transition. When it comes to people that want to hurt you, don't feel guilty fighting back. You've always known this. We still have Cheng Tian's contract in our hands. If we can't avoid bad relations, then we can only do business. Don't tell me, with me behind your back, you're still afraid. Tang Ning rubbed against Mo Ting's palm and shook her head. I'm not afraid, I just feel bad for Lan Shi. Someone that was once on the same side can change so quickly. As you know, Lan Shi used to be a businesswoman. On the surface, what she wants and what you want may seem the same, but in reality, they are worlds apart. You see her as an equal friend, while she sees you as a subordinate. I understand. Tang Ning confirmed her stance. Next time, if Lan Shi came up with another problem to make things difficult for her, then she would no longer be polite to her. After all, if the person that made things difficult for her didn't feel guilty, then why should she feel bad? Don't worry, just wait to film LM. Mo Ting's words had a double meaning. However, Tang Ning only understood one part of it. 8 p.m., at a luxurious 5-star hotel. In order to deal with Ling Feng, Zihao arrived at the private room half an hour early. So, by the time the other party arrived, all they saw was Zihao. Ling Feng was born as a child star and was currently the most popular handsome little fresh meat. With his outstanding looks, he attracted a large number of fans. He even starred in a few dramas that were being broadcasted. So, it was understandable that Lan Shi wanted to use him to create hype. However, seeing Tang Ning hadn't arrived, Ling Feng immediately removed his sunglasses and said something to his assistant. Immediately, his assistant asked Zihao, "Where's Tang Ning?" Zihao looked at the man and pulled out a glass of wine, filling it to the brim. Tang Ning just returned from Moscow today. She's a little airsick and threw up on the way here. In the end, I had no choice but to send her home. I'm sorry, Ling Feng, I'll punish myself with 3 glasses. After hearing this, the man's expression did not look too good. His manager even slammed the table. What does Tang Ning mean by this? Ling Feng, it's not that Tang Ning doesn't want to come. She was just saying she often watches your dramas and really likes you. That's why she asked me to take her out early to see you. Who would have thought? She almost fainted on the way here. Zihao said with a mixture of truth and lies as he downed the 3 glasses in one gulp. Did she really say that? Ling Feng's vanity was satisfied and his anger lessened. Absolutely. Well, since that's the case, I won't blame her. Say hello to her for me and tell her that I'm looking forward to the commercial shooting in 2 days. After Ling Feng finished speaking, he stood up and put his sunglasses back on his face. Seeing Ling Feng leave, Zihao revealed a cold expression. He knew, at this moment, he could only put up a front. Ling Feng, are you really going to let that little model off the hook? Ling Feng's manager asked with a hint of pity. Ling Feng chewed on a piece of gum and gave off a devilish aura. With a personality unique to his age, he replied, "That old model actually dared to stand me up. Fine, if she doesn't show up today, then I won't show up during the shoot either. Let her worry about it. Let's see where she can find a male lead." Chapter 153. But, we signed a contract. Ling Feng's manager furrowed his brows as he followed behind. Just tell them I'm not feeling well and ask the doctor to give me a certificate. Don't you know how to do that? Ling Feng's lips curved into a playful smile. Everything along the way had been smooth sailing. No one had dared to stand him up like this. Yet, a model like Tang Ning had the guts to do this. I understand. Ling Feng's manager straightened his coat as he followed closely behind Ling Feng. The reason Ling Feng could act so recklessly was because his father was the biggest sponsor of the film and television company. Even if he did break the contract and didn't show up for the commercial, he would simply have to pay a small penalty. For him, it was nothing. But, for Tongning, it was different. She treasured every chance she got because she knew it wasn't easy to come by. That night, Beijing was brightly lit. And Zihao drove to Hyatt Regency. This was the first time he had openly entered Tongning's home. Although he had already imagined how luxurious Tongning and Mo Ting's love nest would be, when he actually saw the Spanish palace style, he was still surprised. A moment later, Tongning came downstairs dressed in home attire. She looked at the cautious Zihao and said, "You're here. Ling Feng didn't make things difficult for you, did he?" "Not really. But, this Ling Feng doesn't play by the rules. I don't think he'll let us off so easily," Zihao explained. "Right now, Lan Shi is also trying to suppress you. From now on, we need to be more careful." "You seem to be leaning towards me." Tongning sat on the sofa with a hint of a smile in her voice. Zihao froze for a moment. He didn't realize his words had already revealed the answer that Mo Ting had asked for back in Moscow. "For now, I will stand on the side of my heart," Zihao replied in seriousness. For him to suddenly betray Lan Shi was not something he could do. "It's okay, I won't force you," Tongning said as she ran her fingers through her hair. "After LM's commercial, you will be shooting for a few top magazines. In the coming month, you will be quite busy, so I just wanted to give you a heads up." Zihao spotted Mo Ting walking down from the second floor towards the living room. Compared to when he was dressed in a suit and leather shoes, he looked different. His face was still as perfect as ever, but it was a little less fierce and more homely. He had a jacket hanging on his arm. Seeing Tongning's thin clothing, he helped her put it on before returning to the second floor. He did not interrupt their conversation at all. Just as Zihao was curious about Mo Ting's strange actions, he suddenly noticed the phone on the table. It was a simple message. "Ting. I'm cold. I can't stand your nauseating behavior. I'm going to head back first." After speaking, Zihao stood up. However, Tongning held him back. "Zihao, although I've said this many times, I still want to emphasize that I don't do evil with others. But, I will definitely take revenge. As long as Lan Shi doesn't go overboard, I will try my best to tolerate her. Get ready for the commercial shoot." Zihao said calmly as he turned around and left Hyatt Regency. Tongning's eyes darkened as she wrapped her jacket around herself and returned to the study room. Seeing Mo Ting busy with work, she sneaked up behind him and leaned over to wrap her arms around his neck. Everything about the man in front of her made her extremely infatuated. Whenever they were at home, all she wanted to do was get a little closer to him. "Are you still cold?" Mo Ting asked as he flipped through some documents. Tongning nodded. "Go turn up the heater. Can't I stay in your arms?" Tongning asked gently. "Come on." Mo Ting had no choice but to put down the documents and let her sit in his arms. He then wrapped a blanket around her and wrapped one arm around her waist as he flipped through the documents with the other. "Our bed is a little big," Tongning suddenly said as she lay on Mo Ting's chest. "You don't like a big bed? I hope when I flip over, I won't be able to flip out of your arms. At least the size of the bed is just right." Mo Ting let out a gentle laugh as he listened to Tongning's steady breathing and continued to work. Every now and then, he would look down at Tongning's bare fingers and sigh to himself. It was such a waste that Tongning didn't wear a ring. All he wanted to do was put a ring around her slender hands. 2 days later, LM's commercial shoot was to begin. Originally, this wasn't a big deal and Mo Ting didn't need to make a personal appearance. But, as soon as they left, Mo Ting followed closely behind. The filming crew was in a 5-star resort. The interior design was luxurious and grand. There was also an artificial ocean and a beach. More importantly, it was the place where many celebrities held their weddings. It was very valuable for traveling and viewing. However, as soon as Tongning joined the filming crew, she did not have time to relax. She immediately headed into the waiting room to get changed and get ready. The director of the commercial was a famous film director. He had agreed to help her film the commercial because he wanted to help a friend. He was nearly 40 years old and had a high status in the entertainment industry. He was an upright person and most importantly, he hated people being late. Tangning, it seems Ling Feng hasn't arrived yet. Long Jie couldn't help but complain as she watched Tangning put on her makeup. Could it be that he wants revenge? Don't worry about others, focus on yourself first, Tangning replied as she looked into the mirror. By the way, let me show you the jewelry you will be wearing this time. Long Jie carefully opened the box in front of Tangning. She wasn't sure why, but as soon as Tangning laid eyes on the set of jewelry, she liked it a lot. Firstly, she liked the LM brand. Secondly, she felt an inexplicable sense of intimacy. This set of jewelry is called True Love. Apparently, a customer has already pre-ordered it. There is only one set in the entire world. True Love, True Love. Tangning did not look at the necklace and earrings. Her gaze was directly attracted to the wedding rings. How interesting, right? Using sound waves to convey the words he wants to say to his wife, he used a special technique to engrave them onto the rings. In fact, he used the smallest diamond to embellish the sound waves. It is so beautiful, so special. Tangning picked up the rings and glanced at them. She then noticed a number engraved on the inside of the ring. 0819. That's right, it was 0819. Tangning was a little surprised. At first, she thought it was a coincidence. But, when she saw the card inside the box, her hands began to tremble. What is this? Long Jie leaned over curiously. Seeing the card in Tangning's hands, she couldn't help but exclaim, was this custom made by Big Boss? Chapter 154. Inside the card, there weren't any sweet nothings nor were there any vows of undying love. It simply said, Tingning, for the rest of my life. Tangning looked at the card a few times and placed it against her heart. She then looked at the ring as her heart surged. So, it's a promise, for the rest of my life. Long Jie looked at the ring and suddenly realized Tangning was actually married. After all, she now had a symbol of her identity. So, she couldn't help but wipe the tears from the corners of her eyes. However, just as she was about to say something, a tall figure suddenly appeared in the doorway of the waiting room. Long Jie kept her mouth shut and smiled at Tangning. With a ring, how could I not have a male lead? Seeing Long Jie point towards the door with her chin, Tangning followed her gaze. Mo Ting appeared in the doorway dressed in a brown vintage suit. He was handsome and dignified, he appeared especially steady and tall. Long Jie jumped off the table and left the waiting room, leaving the couple alone. At this time, Tangning slowly stood up from her chair and looked at Mo Ting before looking at the ring. Is this a surprise? Mo Ting's lips curved upwards. His expression was handsome and gentle as he walked over to Tangning and pulled out the ring from the box. He then knelt down on one knee and looked at Tangning. This is a simple ring, it's not a precious gift. But, it doesn't represent even 1/10,000 of the feelings I have for you. Although we are already married, I don't want you to miss out on the romance that others have already experienced. Tangning did not say a word. She simply pulled Mo Ting up and held back her tears. You don't need to be like this, you don't need to be like this. Being able to marry you is already enough for me. Mo Ting wrapped his arm around Tangning. He wanted nothing more than to press her into his heart and let her watch it beat for her. Do you like it? Tangning nodded her head and allowed Mo Ting to put the ring on her right ring finger. This ring isn't the one you will be using for filming. Not many people know how to express this ring. So, it is a secret between the two of us. Even if it's a normal day, you can wear it out. I'm the only one wearing it. Tangning noticed, the man's ring did not have a symbol of a sound wave. Instead, it simply had a white diamond embedded into the body of the ring. The design was simple, but inside the ring was the word NT. Behind it was a string of numbers that matched the words on Tangning's ring and reflected each other. Such a pair of rings, when put together, would be a pair of rings. Looking at it individually, there was no connection at all. It was just a single accessory ring. Mo Ting stretched out his hand towards her. She immediately took out a man's ring from the box and slipped it onto Mo Ting's left ring finger. When the two of them saw each other's hands being bound, their hearts were filled with emotions. Therefore, they snuggled up to each other and held each other's right hand. Beautiful, so beautiful. As she loved LM and had previously endorsed LM wedding rings, it was only natural for her to wear LM jewelry. After all, LM was happy for her to advertise for their jewelry. But, I still want to take wedding photos with you. Tongning revealed her wish. Of course, she never expected this opportunity would come so quickly. As they still had filming to do, Mo Ting did not stay for too long. He quickly left the waiting room. At this time, Long Jie returned with the jewelry Tongning was going to wear. For the sake of getting you to wear a wedding ring, Big Boss has put in a lot of effort. But, this is even better. A wedding should look like a wedding. Long Jie approached Tongning and winked at her. How does it feel? Will Big Boss wear it too? Ah. Tongning nodded. How satisfying. This pair of rings is the only pair in the world. No one understands the meaning of this pair of rings, only the two of you do. Plus, Big Boss has been telling everyone that you are his wife. Although no one will be able to guess, one day, the meaning of this pair of rings will blind the eyes of the public. Tongning was afraid she would lose the ring while she was working, so she quickly removed it and carefully put it away. Is the shoot about to start? Yes, it's almost ready. But, Ling Feng still hasn't arrived. Long Jie shook her head. Just as the two women were furrowing their brows, Zihao appeared in the doorway and said to Tongning, Ling Feng hasn't arrived yet. I don't think he'll be coming today. He's taking revenge on you for standing him up a couple of days ago. But, you don't need to worry. Director Liu doesn't like spoilt brats. If Ling Feng doesn't appear today, he may be replaced by the director. How are we going to film without a male lead? Tongning asked. I'm sure there are backup candidates, but none of them are suitable. Hearing this, Tongning suddenly had an idea. Zihao, there's something I want to do. What is it? Inside Beijing's biggest gym, Ling Feng was currently in the middle of an intense workout. His manager stood beside him holding onto his phone as he furrowed his brows. Ling Feng, let's go film on set. This director is not to be trifled with. What's there to be trifled with? As long as my dad pulls out the money, he'll still show his ugly face, Ling Feng scoffed. Ling Feng snorted. I'll leave that old model hanging first. I'll let her know the consequences of standing me up. To stay in this industry, you have to submit to resources and background. Who does she think she is? How dare she embarrass me? Are you really not going? Ling Feng's manager repeatedly confirmed with Ling Feng. If I say I'm not going, then I'm not going. Why are you so annoying? Ling Feng pushed his manager away impatiently. His manager had no choice but to give LM a phone call. In response, LM explained to Director Liu. However, Director Liu also had a film to shoot. He only had one day, how could he wait? So, he directly replied to LM, either replace Ling Feng, or replace me. There are only two options. But, Ling Feng's father is, I don't care who his father is. If he doesn't show up, there are only two options. LM relayed the director's words to Ling Feng's manager. However, Ling Feng continued to sneer, are you trying to scare me? Since when have you not made it sound so serious? Don't worry about these old geezers. If worse comes to worst, I'll just not film his film in the future. Or, I'll get my dad to step in. Fine, whatever you say. So, the manager told the director that Ling Feng was resting at home because he wasn't feeling well and couldn't go anywhere. As soon as the director heard this, he was furious. He almost threw his phone on the ground. What the hell? Is this how Ling Feng acts? Does he really think he's an A-list big shot? Replace him. Chapter 155. But director, where are we going to find an artist that matches Tongning's looks? Even if there is one, they might not have enough time on their schedule. Why don't we wait a little longer? Should I give Ling Feng a phone call? LM's staff member tried his best to negotiate with Director Liu. As you know, Ling Feng's father is not someone to be offended. The staff member was in a difficult position. Director Liu thought for a moment before placing his hands on his hips and nodding his head, then hurry up and call him. The staff member smiled in relief and immediately turned around to give Ling Feng's manager a phone call. However, the answer he received was that Ling Feng was not feeling well and could not attend the shoot. As you all know, Ling Feng has just finished filming a film and is a little tired. His stomach isn't feeling well and he will be in the hospital for the next few days. Let him rest for a few days. Manager, tell me honestly, what is Ling Feng not happy about? The staff member asked in a quiet voice as he covered his phone. We can change it. Actually, it's not a big deal. Ling Feng was not feeling well to begin with. On top of the fact that Tang Ning stood him up a couple of days ago, his mood has worsened. The staff member immediately understood. Ling Feng was targeting Tang Ning because she didn't have dinner with him. Ling Feng doesn't want to make things difficult for you. How about this? I'll speak to Ling Feng again and you can try to convince Tang Ning to lower her head to Ling Feng. Lower her head? How could she lower her head? Drink. Smile along. Publicly apologize. The staff let out an embarrassed laugh and did not say another word. He had never imagined that Ling Feng would suddenly act so arrogantly because of a reason like this to hold a grudge against Tang Ning. It was all because she didn't have dinner with him. After a few simple sentences, the manager hung up the phone. At this time, LM staff member sighed and turned to the director. Director Liu, please wait a little longer. There's no need to wait, replace Ling Feng, Director Liu said straightforwardly. I heard your conversation just now. This Ling Feng has always been a playboy. Tang Ning's refusal to have dinner with him is a clear indication of her attitude. She doesn't want to create hype with him. So, replace him. In my dictionary, there is no such thing as a spoilt heir. If he has the guts, tell his father to come look for me. He even asked a woman to apologize to him. Don't you feel any shame? The staff weighed the pros and cons between Director Liu and Ling Feng. In the end, they decided to listen to Director Liu and replace Ling Feng. However, choosing a replacement was a bit of a headache. However, just as the staff were getting restless, Zihao approached the two and asked the LM staff, has Ling Feng arrived yet? I'm afraid Ling Feng won't be able to make it. By the way, I wonder if Mr. N knows of any male models that would match Tang Ning's appearance and height. The main problem is, Tang Ning is too tall. For the image to be aesthetically pleasing, we need a male model that is around 1.9 and Zihao lowered his head and pondered for a moment before smiling. There really is such a person. The staff member was overjoyed and immediately asked, can we try? I wonder if he is willing to do us this favor. What about your schedule? How much is the advertising fee? He has a personal relationship with Tang Ning, so he doesn't need any advertising fees. He doesn't lack remuneration, but he does have one request. What is it? He can't reveal his identity. In other words, he can't show his face. During the shoot, we need to clear the set, and Zihao replied. The staff member was stunned for a moment before looking at the director. The director immediately understood. He assumed the man was an outsider that didn't like to be exposed, so he nodded his head, no problem, I will only use his back. What about his appearance? Don't worry, this man, whether it's his appearance or height, is more than enough to match Tang Ning. An outsider? With such good qualities, why doesn't he enter the entertainment industry? Director Liu suddenly asked. No one else can invite him. And Zihao winked at the two and clapped his hands, then it settled. I will first ask Tang Ning to come over and set the scene. What kind of big shot is this? Director Liu couldn't help but mumble. According to Tang Ning's current status, it's impossible to find an artist that is bigger than Ling Feng. I'm also curious, the staff member laughed. A moment later, the first scene was set up. It was a proposal with the beach as the background. The setting was for Tang Ning to stand under the sun as a man suddenly appeared behind her. He gently held onto her right hand and forced a ring onto her finger. There was only one line, if you don't marry me soon, you will be too old. 5 minutes later, Tang Ning came out in a light blue patterned chiffon dress. Her long, soft hair flowed down her back and her face was covered with delicate makeup. She exuded a cold yet peaceful aura. LM was very satisfied with Tang Ning's makeup. As soon as Tang Ning changed, her aura changed. Even though she was usually cold, after putting on makeup, Tang Ning's tranquility was accompanied by a slight smile. She was like a woman in love, her entire body was glowing with happiness. Tang Ning, follow the script first, the director said to Tang Ning. Tang Ning originally wanted to say no, But when she thought about the male lead that was about to appear on stage, she felt a little nervous. This was something she had never felt before. She actually felt nervous. So, she did not reject the director's suggestion. She walked straight into the middle of the set, lowered her head and revealed her expression. Although the director was looking at Tongning through the screen, he was truly surprised. Although a female model's acting wasn't perfect, it was so natural and flawless. The anticipation one felt when waiting for their lover to appear, the anxiety one felt after waiting for so long, and the disappointment of being stood up. Tongning expressed all of these emotions through her eyes. Most importantly, she was just a model. Compared to those popular flowers and grasses, she was much better. Cut. The director yelled at Tongning. Afterwards, he turned his head and asked the staff member, "When will the male lead be arriving? I heard he is getting ready to change. Let's see who Tongning can invite. If he doesn't have any influence, then let Tongning do the shoot alone." "Okay, Director Liu, I will listen to you," LM's staff member replied. "I will also keep an eye out for other male models." As the two conversed, Zihao suddenly walked up to them and ordered all unrelated personnel to leave. LM's staff member immediately complied. At this moment, the only people left on set were a few key figures and Tongning. They wanted to see what kind of god Tongning had invited. Following that, they heard a series of steady footsteps. They quickly turned their heads and saw a man with an imposing appearance, walking towards them with leisurely steps. Chapter 156. Hi. Hi Rui. CEO. The staff was shocked as he pointed at Mo Ting and stuttered. How is this possible? Director Liu also saw the scene in front of him and was in disbelief. Tongning actually managed to invite Hai Rui's CEO, Mo Ting. The mysterious CEO that controlled the life and death of an artist, practically controlled all the resources in the entertainment industry and was at the top of Hai Rui Entertainment. Oh my god. There was nothing more surprising and frightening than this. Mo. President Mo, hello. The LM staff immediately bowed respectfully towards Mo Ting. Even Director Liu had to be polite to Mo Ting. "No need to be polite," Mo Ting said coldly as he adjusted his black suit jacket. "Then you." The LM staff obviously didn't believe Tongning could invite Mo Ting, so he asked for confirmation. "This was Mo Ting. I knew Tongning needed help, so I took some time to come over." "Will it take long?" Mo Ting asked calmly without explaining their relationship. All he did was send a message to the public. He and Tongning were on good terms. "It won't take long, it won't take long. It turns out President Mo can guest star for a friend," the LM staff explained in surprise. "It will only be Tongning." Mo Ting's gaze was sharp as he replied straightforwardly. The LM staff was stunned for a moment. He didn't expect Mo Ting to be so direct. Originally, he had already made up a story in his mind, but Mo Ting's next words brought him back on track. "She is a model that is hard to come by. I can't find a reason to reject her." Mo Ting used a statement. It was like he didn't accept any rebuttals. Hearing this, the staff and Director Liu nodded their heads in understanding. It turned out Mo Ting valued talent. However, Mo Ting and Tongning were both cold and mysterious to the public. So, to others, even if Mo Ting helped Tongning, there was nothing wrong with it. Even if they thought of the two of them together, they would still feel a sense of distance between them, like they were just friends. But, even if they were friends, Mo Ting's treatment towards Tongning was already special enough. Even Hai Rui's artists didn't have the opportunity to see Mo Ting, yet Tongning was able to ask them to drop their work and come to her rescue with a single phone call. "Also, I hope that my appearance on the set will remain a secret forever." "Of course, no problem, CEO Mo." LM's staff immediately made an okay gesture. They had to quickly prepare the contract and get everyone present to sign a confidentiality agreement. Mo Ting was not someone they could afford to offend. Mo Ting did not say a word. He simply lifted his head and looked at Tongning in the distance. Their eyes met for a good few seconds. LM originally wanted to ask Mo Ting if he knew what they were going to film today. But, remembering Mo Ting was the one to save the day, even if he randomly filmed, LM would not have any objections. So, LM staff turned to the director and asked, "Then can we start now?" "Of course, but President Mo knows. Let's start." Mo Ting did not waste any more time. He knew better than Tongning what she was supposed to film today. There were a total of 3 scenes: the proposal, the wedding, and the post-wedding. "Please," Director Liu gestured for Mo Ting to enter. In reality, he really wanted to ask if Mo Ting needed to explain his positioning and positioning. But, because he was talking to Mo Ting, he did not have the courage to ask. All he could do was take a few shots and see what the effect would be. "Director Liu, hurry and pinch my face to see if I'm dreaming. This is Mo Ting we are talking about, the CEO of Hai Rui. I can't believe he actually came to film our commercial. Wouldn't it be great if we could use it to promote our commercial?" Director Liu turned to look at the staff. Deep down, he felt extremely honored. After all, how many directors in this world could film a commercial for Mo Ting? Up until now, he was the only one. This was the Mo Ting that could turn the entertainment industry upside down with a simple stomp of his foot. This Ling Feng was definitely worth it. There could be 100 Ling Fengs, but Mo Ting only had one. "Not only you, even I feel like I'm on cloud 9. Look at the other staff, their jaws are about to drop to the ground. It seems Tongning is not to be underestimated." After speaking, Director Liu turned to the 2 people in front of the camera and said, "Tongning, you can get to know President Mo first. Let's take a 10-minute break before we start filming." Tongning looked at Mo Ting, at this man dressed in a black tailor-made suit with a neatly ironed collar. His body was tall and well built. He was so handsome that he could turn the world upside down as he walked towards her. Her heart softened into a mess. Even if the scenery in front of her was fake and the words in the commercial were fake, as long as the person was real, that was enough. "President Mo, I wasn't confident that you would agree." Mo Ting looked at Tongning's dress and long hair flying in the wind. He walked over to her and gently tucked her hair behind her ear. "No one else can do me a favor but you are my disaster. Didn't you say you wanted to propose to me and let me enjoy the romance that I deserve? I want you to film this commercial with me. Do I have to do whatever you say?" Tongning's lips curved upwards as a smile blossomed in the beautiful scenery. Mo Ting couldn't help but want to touch her, so he immediately said to the director with a serious expression, "There's no need to wait for 10 minutes. Let's start. I have a meeting later." "Okay, let's start." Director Liu nodded his head and began to prepare. At first, the camera showed Tongning standing barefoot on the beach looking into the distance. Following that, it showed Tongning pacing back and forth on the beach. Finally, it showed Tongning clutching her dress as she stood on the beach with tears rolling down her cheeks. At this time, a tall figure suddenly appeared behind her. From behind, he carefully held onto her right hand and placed the proposal ring on her finger. The script was played, but it did not sound emotional. It was because Mo Ting's voice was too deep and seductive. At this time, there was a close-up shot of Tongning's face. Her eyes were filled with surprise and sadness. It was as if she was facing the man she deeply loved. The director looked at the couple's natural actions, especially Tongning's tears of joy. He was completely shocked. He had never imagined they would have such a high completion rate. In fact, they practically completed the scene in one take. The entire scene was smooth without any awkwardness. Afterwards, Tongning pounced into Mo Ting's arms and placed her ring-wearing right hand on his shoulder. The scene was harmonious and beautiful. Between Tongning and Mo Ting, there was a tacit understanding and affection. It was like they were a couple that had been together for many years. They treated each other as naturally as they treated each other. Are they really not a couple? LM staff couldn't help but mumble, "Director, look at Tongning's cute and helpless expression and President Mo's doting expression. If they aren't a couple, then they must be natural-born actors. Which one do you believe more?" Chapter 157. Director Liu froze for a moment as he rubbed his chin and thought for a moment. Tongning rehearsed it once before, her acting is not bad. As for President Mo, I didn't pay attention to his expression. Whether or not he's in love is a personal matter. If you want to survive in Beijing for a long time, don't be so nosy. LM staff member gave a slight smile as he rubbed his head. I just feel like they look good together. That's a good thing for LM. Just like that, the first scene of the commercial was quickly completed. The camera crew immediately moved on to the next scene. The second scene was the couple running towards the church. The bride had scraped her feet, so the groom removed her shoes and carried her on his back up the steps. Not far from the resort was a European-style church. However, in the scene, the church was only in the distance. However, this did not hinder the beauty of the scene. This time, Tongning was actually going to wear a wedding dress. Inside the waiting room, Tongning was already changing with the help of her makeup artist. Hanging beside her was the champagne-colored strapless wedding dress she was going to wear. It wasn't the most beautiful wedding dress, it was layered with layers of gauze and had no diamonds or crystals. Instead, it was handmade embroidery. It was delicate and gorgeous. The dress didn't have a large hemline because LM didn't want to steal the show. But, in Tongning's heart, just like her relationship with Mo Ting, it never needed to be grand. Long Jie held back her words. It wasn't until Tongning had changed into the wedding dress in front of the mirror that she couldn't help but exclaim, "How beautiful." Yes, the wedding dress is normal enough. The main thing is, the person is beautiful, the makeup artist complimented as she helped Tongning adjust the hemline. The makeup artist complimented as she helped Tongning adjust the hem of her dress before leaving the room. At this time, Long Jie quickly approached with a beautiful smile. "Are you trying to make up for not being able to take a wedding photo with Big Boss?" Tongning smiled and did not deny it. "Fine, since your husband is Big Boss, you can do whatever you want. But, you look really beautiful like this." Previously, Tongning had also attended a wedding show. But, the feeling was completely different. After all, her partner was the closest person to her. This time, they were going to show off the jewelry that the bride would wear during the wedding. So, Tongning put on a necklace and earrings in advance. Her ink-black hair was tied up in a bun with a crystal hairband and a long veil trailing behind her. Just like that, she walked out of the waiting room, causing the people around her to cheer in amazement. Meanwhile, Mo Ting, who had already finished changing, stood not too far away and stared at her. His heart felt like it had received a heavy blow. He had imagined Tongning putting on a wedding dress for him a million times in his mind, but when he actually saw the scene, his eyes began to swell up. The staff from LM glanced at their expressions, lowered his head and smiled, but did not say a word. But it accurately expressed one meaning. If this was not love, then what was there to be sad about? All right, prepare for the second match. Under the director's command, the couple quickly found their positions and slowly appeared in front of the camera. They were an engaged couple who were in a hurry to get married. However, the bride ran too fast and hurt her leg. The groom quickly knelt down and carried the bride on his back. He then grabbed onto the bride's shoe and threw it to the ground. Tongning sat on Mo Ting's broad back, her heart pounding. It seemed, no matter how much time had passed, every time she thought of this person, every time she saw this person, every time she saw this person, every time he treated her well, she would involuntarily let out a silly smile. The director quickly noticed this and felt it was perfect. Whether it was still or moving, Tongning's beauty was vivid and natural. Yet, she didn't try to steal the shine from the jewelry. Filming soon came to an end. However, Mo Ting carried Tongning on his back and walked quite a distance away. Tongning patted him on the shoulder. "Aren't you tired? I want to carry you on my back until the end of time. Mrs. Mo, have I ever complimented you on how beautiful you look in a wedding dress?" Mo Ting did not look back as he continued walking. "Mr. Mo, I'm sure I haven't complimented you on how handsome you look in a white suit." The couple quickly completed 2 scenes. Director Liu was extremely satisfied. This meant they didn't even need a day to finish, they could wrap up in half a day and they could even get some rest at night. Not long after, the couple returned to their original location to discuss the third scene. The third scene was the highlight. To show off the wedding ring. LM staff suggested they shoot it straight after the wedding and didn't need to change clothes. However, the director felt it wasn't a good idea. It was best to express 3 layers. Tongning thought for a moment and suggested, "Then, let's do it after 10 years of marriage." Our feelings and wedding ring will last forever. What do you guys think? Let's do it after 10 years, the director nodded his head in agreement. So, the third scene took place on a wooden bridge. In the distance was a lush green forest, making the entire scene colorful and clean. This time, Mo Ting was dressed in a dark blue handmade suit. As usual, his back was facing the camera, but his entire body exuded a sense of nobility and maturity. He was no longer the inexperienced man that tried to sneak attack from behind and throw the bride's shoes away. His body was tall and reliable, like a mountain. Beside him, Tangning no longer had the anxiety and disappointment of a little girl. She no longer had the excitement and nervousness of getting married. At this moment, all she had was peace and contentment. The couple's backs were facing the camera as they faced the scenery. Mo Ting's left hand held onto Tangning's right hand as they revealed their exquisite wedding rings. Then, like a little woman, Tangning rested her head on Mo Ting's shoulder. Perfect. Too beautiful. The director praised excitedly. As for the others, they were still immersed in their feelings and couldn't stop reminiscing. It wasn't until the couple finally separated that they realized it was just a commercial. Then, God, this commercial was definitely going to be a hit. Everyone clapped from the bottom of their hearts, some even screamed in excitement. Tangning was back to being a model and Mo Ting was back to being the high and mighty CEO of Hai Rui. The distance between the two was once again apparent. Tangning, you are amazing. Of course, I would also like to thank President Mo for his cameo. It was simply perfect. Director Liu laughed happily. His praise came from the bottom of his heart. Mo Ting nodded his head and glanced at Tangning. As long as I was able to help. You were a great help. Really, thank you so much, President Mo. LM's staff quickly bowed in gratitude. Remember what you promised me, you will keep my identity a secret. Also take note of the mole on my ear. Don't worry, it won't be a problem, the director nodded. Go on with your work, hurry home, Tangning said as she turned to Mo Ting. Mo Ting did not say a word, he simply nodded his head. Let's go home and pick out our photos. Tangning understood what he meant as she smiled. As for Ling Feng, what was going on? Chapter 158. His agent tried every possible way to persuade him, but Ling Feng finally finished his workout. Sparkling beads of sweat slid down his bronze skin. It was indeed a body that exuded strong hormones. Coupled with his tough and handsome face, it was no wonder that he could become popular so quickly. However, his character. His manager was hard to say. Although he was angry with Tangning, there was no need to delay his work and punish someone else. But, Ling Feng was that kind of person. Let's go film the commercial, Ling Feng said to his manager as he wiped away his sweat. Okay, I'll go get the car. You can change on the way. His manager let out a sigh of relief as he hurried to the parking lot to get his car. Meanwhile, Ling Feng looked tired. Even though they had arrived at the resort, it didn't seem like he would be able to recover. This made his manager quite worried. The fans are all waiting for the highlights of the shoot. Hurry and take a nap. In a moment, show your perfect face to the cameras. How many people in Beijing can you find that are more handsome than me? Ling Feng scoffed as he crossed his arms and closed his eyes in the back seat. It seemed, he thought his appearance was a form of salvation and a gift to the entire filming crew. Not long after, the two men's car drove into the resort. However, the most surprising thing was, the filming crew were already packing up their props. Ling Feng's manager thought the director had no choice but to reschedule the shoot because Ling Feng hadn't turned up. So, he looked everywhere for LM's representative and even gave him a phone call. However, LM's representative had already returned to the agency and said LM would speak to Ling Feng's management company. Ling Feng's manager placed one hand on his hip and explained to LM's representative, Ling Feng is indeed not feeling well and he is currently on set even though he is sick. Isn't he here already? However, the representative was no longer in the mood to talk to him as he directly hung up the phone. Helpless, the manager grabbed onto one of the workers and asked, "Where is the representative from LM? Our Ling Feng is already here." The worker looked at Ling Feng in the car and replied, "But, the commercial has already been completed." As soon as the manager heard this, he was stunned. His brows furrowed into a crease. "What do you mean? The male lead hasn't even arrived yet. What do you mean it's already completed?" The director directly changed the male lead, and the commercial filming went smoothly, so we wrapped up half a day earlier. After saying that, the worker carried the tools and left the resort, leaving only the manager with an abnormally ugly expression. He never imagined LM, the director, and Tangning would have the guts to replace Ling Feng. They actually had the guts to replace Ling Feng. The manager trembled in anger. After returning to the car, he held onto the steering wheel for a long time, not knowing what to say. In the end, it was Ling Feng who sensed the change in his emotions. He closed his eyes and asked, "When will we start filming?" "We've finished shooting the commercial," the agent replied in a depressed tone. "What do you mean?" Ling Feng opened his eyes and asked his agent excitedly. "You've been replaced." "The commercial has already been shot," her agent replied again. "Motherfucker, do you know who I am? How dare you replace me?" Ling Feng was, after all, young and impetuous. Not only did he blurt out vulgarities, he even clenched his right hand into a fist and smashed it on the back of the chair. "Who was it? Who told you to change it? You don't want to stay in this industry anymore? I'll go find out immediately." The manager's expression was dark. According to Ling Feng's current status, although he wasn't an A-lister, he was comparable to one. Yet, LM actually replaced Ling Feng. No wonder when he spoke to LM's staff, they didn't even want to talk to him. It turned out. "Immediately give my father a phone call. If I find out whose idea was this, I'm going to screw him to death. I hope it has nothing to do with Tangning." Ling Feng acted like an arrogant, spoiled brat. His acting career had been smooth sailing and most people doted on him. So, when faced with this kind of humiliation, it would be strange if he could endure it. The manager called LM's staff, but no one picked up. So, he called the director. "Director, I just went to the set with Ling Feng, but the staff told us the commercial has already been shot. What's going on? Isn't Ling Feng sick?" To let him rest, I swapped out the model. "Is there a problem?" Director Liu asked calmly. "How could you do this? Ling Feng is LM's designated male lead. Plus, we have already signed a contract. LM is breaching the contract. Plus, I've already explained to you, Ling Feng is sick. Why would he go to the gym when he's sick?" Director Liu laughed. The manager was speechless. "His fans have already posted photos of him working out online. How could you tell me he's not feeling well?" Director Liu's voice was fearless and indifferent. "The commercial has already been shot, my job is done. As for whether or not you breached the contract, you can discuss it with LM. I won't be responsible." After speaking, Director Liu was about to hang up, but his manager held him back. "Who's the replacement model?" "An outsider. It's best you don't ask around. You can't afford to offend him." As soon as he finished speaking, Ling Feng's manager's phone began to ring. This made the manager almost throw his phone on the floor. Seeing his expression, Ling Feng quickly asked, "Who is it?" "The director told us not to ask around. He said he can't afford to offend him. Do you think I, Ling Feng, am someone to be trifled with?" Ling Feng said angrily. He then pulled out his phone and typed out a short paragraph online. "I really don't know what I did wrong to be replaced for no reason. Although I already knew about the unspoken rules of the industry, I still feel very disappointed. I won't blame anyone, I simply feel like I didn't work hard enough. I hope everyone is treated fairly." As he was already popular and his fans were all young, after seeing this paragraph, they immediately went crazy, asking him what he had experienced, who bullied him and why he would say such negative things. Not long after, a fan posted Ling Feng's itinerary for the day. He was going to a holiday resort to film a commercial. Could it be that the male lead had been stolen? Fans began to speculate. Of course, there were also a few loyal fans that contacted An Zihao, hoping to get some insider information from him. However, An Zihao did not respond. In just an hour, the post had been shared over 100,000 times. This made Ling Feng quite satisfied. Since others didn't want to make things easy for him, then he was going to make things difficult for them together. After all, the fans in the industry were more tolerant towards male celebrities than female celebrities. He wanted to see director Tongning and LM scolded like dogs. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.